Would you please join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Alice Norris, the mayor.
James Lucido, Commissioner.
Doug Hughes, Commission President.
Kathy West, City Commissioner.
And I see we have a packed house tonight. It's always good to have citizens come out when things on the agenda interest you. So at the beginning, we will we'll look at the agenda. So we will, so you'll know exactly where your portion of the agenda will come. If you are planning on speaking this evening, we'd like you to fill out a card. So those are available in the back of the room. First of all, one of the things that I get to do as mayor is to make proclamations, and this one is for July as Parks and Recreation Month. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Oregon City, and whereas our parks and recreation are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region. And whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction, and whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas parks and recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife, and whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas Oregon City also recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now therefore, I, Alice Norris, Mayor of the City of Oregon City, do proclaim July 2010 as Park and Recreation Month and urge all citizens to enjoy a city park this month. Thank you. Next on the agenda is citizen comment, and this is the part of the agenda where citizens may speak to us on items that are not listed on the agenda. And I'll tell you how this works. When you come up to the microphones here, they are already on, so we ask you to speak close. You have up to 3 minutes to talk to us about whatever topic, and you self-monitor here with this little handy device. And then please give your name. You do not need to give your address if you've clearly written it on your card. Just say the city in which you reside, and then you may speak to it. So with that, do we have? Yes, we do. Gordon Westfall. Welcome.
I'm Gordon Westfall in Oregon City, and the reason why I'm here is because of the city parks. I run a nonprofit called the Center for Sustainable Today. We've been here about 5 years now. I've lived here about 18. We took on, thank you, Scott Archer, for the program. We talked to Scott Archer and the City Commission a number of years ago, 3 years ago. And we took on Atkinson Park on 16th and Jackson. Hasn't been touched in 25 years. A number of incidences up there we won't discuss. Graffiti, lots of things have happened in that park over the years. And so I've been in that park 3 years. I grew up 1 block away. I went to Barclay School. It was really beautiful. So I came back with my children and realized that I wanted to give back to my city. And so my nonprofit, the Center for Sustainable Today, and I and a number of people in the community have taken on Atkinson Park as a chemical-free zone. There's no herbicides or pesticides being sprayed in that park. We've been cleaning out that park from the holly, the clematis, the ivy, the blackberry. I mean, we've got every invasive species in that park. We've done a number of television shows in that park. We've done a number of workshops and seminars in that park. And we have an amazing festival. I've handed all you gentlemen and ladies a flyer. We're looking for as many people to come. It's a free event, July 31st, and it just so happens to be my birthday. I made it to 40, so I said, okay, I'm going to have a party every year, and we might as well just do it in our chemical-free zone. So we are going to have a number of bands powered by solar panels. It's all about sustainability, self-sufficiency, and we're going to have some mushroom workshops and some speakers like Rocky Smith will be coming in and having a little discussion. And it's open to the public, 10 to 4. It's on 16th and Jackson, and we're really looking for just heads to be there. You know, the trees don't have ears, and the bands will notice that. So we're looking for people to show up and listen to the music, have a really good time, enjoy a chemical-free zone. The reason, so that's one of the things that we've been doing in the community, and we're feeling really happy about it, and we're on for another year. So this will be our 3rd year going on to this project. And lastly, we had a great time at the Pioneer Family Festival, holding down the sustainable section of that event. We brought in the solar panels and really made it a great event, and found out that that's really where we need to be. Sustainability needs to go to the mainstream, and preaching to the choir, we can do that all day long, but I felt we really made a difference to a number of people's lives at that event. So Rocky Smith did a great job putting on that Pioneer Family Festival, and looking for everybody to show up at least for 5 minutes on that Saturday, July 31st, and you can check out sustainabletoday.org to find out anything about that project. Do you have any questions at all for us at all? Or?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Doug Neely, by chance, he was the first person at the first day of the Chemical Free Park 3 years ago. So it's great to see him still around. So.
If Doug's still around, you all can be around too.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing everybody there July 31st.
Right. It's the same day as our First City Celebration downtown, so we have 2 opportunities on that day. An equal opportunity event. Announcer. Okay, as we look at the agenda, commissioners, is there anything that you wish to have taken off, for instance, the consent agenda, or reordered for any reason? Okay, what is it?
I think some of the issues on the consent agenda isn't.
Yes.
It's more for explanations so the public has an opportunity to hear
Number
what
8, did you say?
7H, yes.
No, it's 8.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's not so good.
No, it doesn't 8.
Yes, I do.
Okay, what is it?
It says I was present at the June 8th work session, but I don't think I was. So I'll pull that to vote different,
Right? It's your option.
Oh, I don't have to pull it. Okay, don't have to pull it. Okay, just abstain then. Sorry.
Okay. All right, then we will take the agenda in question. If you wish to see it.
I think, I'll check with the city attorney on this. I think on the consent agenda, we need to pull item B off, because I think I have to stay on that at least. I'd like to.
Yeah, you probably
The bicycle?
pull it off.
Yeah, the MS4.
Otherwise, you have to vote together. It probably makes sense for you to make sure that you're not on that, given the.
It's not MS4.
That's
Which item are we talking about?
8B. That's the MS4 Joint Defense Confidentiality and Common Interest Agreement.
Oh, and I wasn't on the consent agenda. Okay.
Yeah.
The E, okay. Anything else? Otherwise, we will take.
Well, I just wanted to know if I can make a brief comment after 6A, in between A and B,
Of course.
because I have a staff member here and I want to report on the historic inventory forms that Commissioner Smith's been asking about.
Yes. Our staff's already had mentioned that was going on. So, are we ready to go then? All right, looking the first item on the agenda that I think most of you have come here is for the appeal of the Atkinson Memorial Church application. This is appeal 10-03, and we have a procedure that we will follow on this, which is governed by Oregon City Code and Oregon State statutes. We will have a staff report at the beginning, then the appellant will have an opportunity to make, no, it's not the appeal person, it's the applicant will have an opportunity to make their case for 5 minutes. Then the appellant will have an opportunity to make their case for 5 minutes. Then we will open it up for public testimony, for opportunity for individuals to speak for 3 minutes each. Then there will be a rebuttal opportunity for the at the end. Then we will close the public hearing, and the City Commission will have an opportunity to ask questions and deliberate and make our decision. But toward that end, I will turn to our attorney who this evening for this item is Terry Richter, who asked the Commission about bias and conflict of interest.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commission. This hearing, we've issued mail notice of this matter, and it has been provided, along with the staff report, this limited appeal issue that is before the Commission. This is a closed record hearing. No new evidence is allowed. All testimony and arguments must be directed towards the limited issue raised on appeal, as set forth in the notice and staff report. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. One thing I would like to add to the summary of how we will proceed tonight is that public testimony is limited to those people who participated below. So you have to have participated sometime during the proceeding, either before the HRB or before the City Commission, the first proceeding, in order to testify tonight.
Mary, may I interrupt? Does that mean oral testimony only?
Oral or written?
Oral or written. Okay, thank you.
At this time, I will ask the Commission if they have any bias, ex parte contact, conflict of interest that they wish to disclose.
Commissioner Smith.
I don't participate in any of the discussions on this issue because I'm an employee of Atkinson Church, and so I will be sitting in the audience.
Okay.
Commissioner Nocita.
I have a couple of things to discuss. So, start right away. Conflict of interest, I don't have any. I have some ex parte to disclose. And like last time, I heard from folks on both sides of this. And disclose some of these communications. One, I consider a friend and am a neighbor of the chair of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association Land Use Committee, and had two communications with her. I think most of the discussions were more opinion than fact. One of the statements I received from her was that, to the effect that, I don't know if I can remember the quote exactly, was that this church edition had been quote unquote designed to death. And I think that was an expression of the fact that it factually has been a long process. But I'm conscious that relationship and the sympathy I have for people who have gone through a very I'm sure has been an arduous process is I can recognize the need to make this about applying the facts to the city approval criteria. On the opposing side, I've heard from one of the neighbors twice, once through an email and once walking in front of my home, walking with his wife and his pet. And there was, I think, one statement during that conversation which may be interpreted again either as a fact or opinion or a combination of that, which was a statement, if I recall correctly, to the effect that the church was affluent, and that is not an approval criteria. And I, don't think it's applicable to this decision. I have also heard many communication or headed communication from the appellant in this matter, who had informed me that HRB had made a decision that it was adverse to her and that she'd retain an attorney. That's as far as the people involved with this, and I want to disclose some other matters that I think involve ex parte as well. I have, in the last City Commission hearing, I expressed my concern that this is a very important decision for our community, especially given the history of the church in the town and the role Carnegie Square plays in the life of the city. And I, have given a lot of thought to this this process, and I guess this would actually be another ex parte, and I don't know from whom I heard it. I overheard it after a commission meeting that the decision of the HRB had been appealed. So I guess that is pretty much, a factual piece of information too. And I will disclose the discussion I had after that meeting when I heard about that with the city manager, that to the effect that, the reflection on some of the concerns I had as a reviewer on a matter like this of this significance after the last commission meeting or the last appeal, we have the benefit in Oregon City of having an on-call engineer / landscape architect that we've brought to bear on the whole project. And one of the things I've been reflecting about after the last commission meeting was, I won't speak for my colleagues, but I had a concern on my own part about, my hearing concerns and having concerns, but not having really the ability to articulate, because I'm not a trained architect, any, a really effective response. And I raised with the city manager the idea as to whether we could also, because of that other example, retain an architect, an on-call architect, for this hearing to allow us to deliberate more effectively, given that architecture and design is often very technical. And there are terms that are kind of specific to that profession. And we talked about it. I also talked about it with the city attorney, who basically advised that generally no, and specifically in this instance, no, we could not hire an on-call architect. I furthered that conversation by saying, if I disclose the ex parte contact, that I benefit from the conversations with individual architects and sound them out on ideas. And he said, because that's not a commission thing, that's an individual commissioner thing, that yes, that could be, if I disclose the contacts and any information on an ex parte basis that came out of that. So I will disclose that I did have 3 separate discussions with architects on this matter that I benefited very greatly from, in both proposing stuff that I thought could kind of bring, both sides of this kind of to a happy consensus, or as close as we could get to a happy consensus. And I did benefit from that, but I think I'll raise the specific things I found out during the discussion. And finally, speaking to the bias question, I also had a conversation with the city attorney because I'm of the opinion that the Historic Review Board, and I frankly honestly express the opinion also that staff had basically ignored what we did as a city commission during the first appeal in our request for consideration of different materials, and that essentially they've come back to us with the same materials. And because I didn't think I could really make a decision quite differently than the first time around, with the inability to decide differently. You know, it's just I guess anything's possible. With that, you know, kind of pre-qualified as bias. And so the city attorney advised me that no, that wouldn't. So those are my disclosures.
Can I follow up? You need to disclose the content of the expected contacts you had with the architect to give, yes, now, so that you can give parties an opportunity to question you further.
Okay, all right, okay. So, I guess some of this is opinion and some of this is factual too. One of the questions I had asked architects went to what the city commission did last time, which was requesting materials that were more authentic and compatible. And I, you know, proposed some ideas, stone, brick, for example, stucco. And one of the architects brought an example of a material that I had not considered, which was terracotta. And given an example, well, actually two examples in Portland of buildings in Portland, which had, like this proposal, a very historic original part, and then an extension or an addition that was you know, designed more modernly, but had terracotta as the exterior material. And that specific example was the extension to the Mercy Court headquarters on the Burnside Bridge. And there was another building in the Pearl District that had similarly terracotta panels on the side. I honestly can't remember the name of it. Also factually, another architect had given me the name of something that I can't remember. I have not been able to verify with my own research. Somebody, he described something as a Maybach arch, and I take that. He was an architect in the early 20th century named Bernard Maybach out in San Francisco, who did a lot of architecture like the House of Fine Arts. And what I saw on the web described was like kind of like a pointed arch, kind of like the building on John Adams and 9th that is in our materials actually. So I didn't know what he meant, so that historic example of a particular type of architecture was another example. I guess I also learned what a scupper is. I didn't know that before. And I'll also mention too that I've done web research myself on hardy materials, and I've gone to the website of the James Party Company as well. And I wanted to see how the stuff was manufactured, but they did describe the materials basically being a combination of sand, wood fiber, concrete, and something else I can't remember either. Those are what I can recall as the pertinent facts. If I come, you know, if something comes that I don't remember right now, I'll bring it to everybody's attention. So.
Do you want to hear from others, or do you want to give folks an opportunity to comment?
I think, why don't we give others an opportunity to comment?
This is the time that we would allow anyone who wishes to comment about Commissioner Nacita's disclosures the opportunity to do so.
Okay, seeing none, then we will determine that Commissioner Nacita can sit through the.
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner.
My only thing was that I said we looked at the site and knew what was going to be there, and I saw multiple issues.
Okay. Commissioner Nacita?
I just want to confirm a memory. I thought that one of the letters from a citizen that I received was about the city commission.
There was a letter from the architect.
I think it was a letter from a neighbor.
The alert from the architect too should have been in the packet. I
No, this came to our email addresses.
And we, staff's gonna summarize the documents that have been received into the record so far.
They're probably all there. Anything else? Commissioner Rest.
I'm also a resident of the neighborhood, and after the last, I don't know, was that in May or June when we had the first appeal on this, I've looked to try to figure out some of the concerns visually from the street level, and that's about it.
Okay. Continue.
You can go on to staff report.
Okay, great. So we will begin the process. Christina Robinson Gardner.
Thank you, Mayor Norris, Commissioners. Last time I was here working on this file, I was 9 months pregnant. This has definitely taken quite a fair amount of time, so.
Yeah, you just like giving birth to a baby. It's
Thinking of a good birth analogy, but I haven't quite figured it out. What I'd like to do tonight is briefly discuss timeline and some of the bigger issues. Staff has written a memo to the City Commission in your packet. I won't go through in detail, but I am available to speak on any issue you'd like to on this. Let's see. Okay. The 120-day date was set for tomorrow, July 7th. The applicant has extended it to July 13th to allow time for findings of fact, but it is not allowing it to be extended further than that. So, for the most part, this is the last hearing on this application this evening, and a final decision is expected by the City Commission. Specifically, as I wrote in the memo, these are the City Commission's 3 options. Affirm the Historic Review Board's decision, thereby denying the appeal and approving the application as submitted by the applicant. 2, the Commission may adopt an appropriate condition of approval to address any criteria they feel has not been met, approve the application with conditions, or deny the appeal. Or 3, if the criteria cannot be met through a condition of approval, the Commission may approve the appeal and therefore deny the application. So approve as is, deny as is, or propose conditions are the 3 options you have to make. Briefly, if you can do it, I'd like to go through the timeline of and where we are today. This application started at the October Historic Review Board meeting with the design advice. This Historic Review Board does a non-binding design advice meeting, which is about 10 to 15 minutes to allow the applicant to propose designs and hear non-binding comment for the board to incorporate into the final proposal. So that was done at the October 27th hearing. The applicant then turned in the application, and the Historic Review Board meeting that reviewed the application was on February 23rd. They approved the application with some specific conditions relating to the demolition of the house on site, and then second, they wanted to make sure that the mechanical units on the top of the building could not be seen from the public right-of-ways, and they wanted the applicant to come back with specific details on the reveal, the front entrance porch, and some other detail issues. And so at that point, the Historic Review Board approved it with conditions, and on March 10th, the appellant, Margaret Foss, filed her first appeal. And the decision was appealed on 2 issues. 1, the negative effect on the historic value of the district, and 2, that the exterior design was not compatible with the existing neighborhood. On April 21st, the City Commission held their appeal hearing, the first appeal, and they voted to uphold the decision but remand it back with the following motion. Quote, to consider changes to the materials that are more authentic within the McLaughlin neighborhood. On May 5th, the applicant submitted a revised proposal. The fiber cement board squares would be replaced with 4-inch exposed fiber cement lap siding. The rain collection downspouts have been added, and in addition, many of the previously imposed conditional requirements were responded to, such as landscaping, rooftop utilities, and the inclusion of the handrails. At the May 11th Historic Review Board work session, the Atkinson appeal was brought up, and the remand was discussed. Staff made clear that although the record was reopened, the issues for the HRD were not unlimited. Instead, they were limited to the compatibility criteria, both as it relates to the historic structures as well as the district as a whole. Physically, I couldn't talk about the demolition request because that was not appealed. It was the compatibility criteria that was appealed.
And so that was the direction of the city attorney for the Historic Review Board to look at, which is the general compatibility section, and along with the direction of the city commission. On May 25th, the Historic Review Board considered the revised application by the applicant from May 5th. Let's see. HRB found that the proposed application was compatible but imposed an additional condition, that the materials on the breezeway included a smooth finished stucco as more in keeping with the parged coating finish of the Historic Review Board. They were also satisfied with the condition that required the details to come back to the Historic Review Board because the applicant had provided those details, and they removed that condition from the previous condition of approval. On June 4th, Margaret Foss appealed the remanded decision, and we are here tonight on July 7th looking at the remanded decision with a 120-day date approaching. What I'd like to do is briefly go through the site and just get everyone reoriented to the building and the changes that have been made since the original appeal. This is looking down. You see the breezeway section is the small section that actually touches the historic building, and that is to get people from the Atkinson Church to the new addition. The transition zone holds the elevator and is architecturally the transition zone of the building. And then you'll see the classroom ring where the majority of where the classrooms are and the activities will be held. This is from the applicant's May 25th application. You can see above is the previous, and that shows the stucco paneling on the bump outs of the classroom area, and also shows
Not stucco.
the panels on the, okay, the stucco panels.
No, they're not stucco. They're hardy.
Excuse me just a second. Right. Well, I know the minutia about stucco panel and ethos and hardy plank. I am not the expert on that. I'm going to leave that to the applicant. He's willing and able to discuss it in detail. So I'm going to give what I have on my staff report. And I understand that these words are always intermixed, and I want to make sure that we are using the right language. So, but I'm going to leave that to the applicant to talk about in detail what was proposed at each level of the building. What I'd like to show is the area below, which incorporates cement board lap siding, which is 4-inch lap siding on the bump out areas, which is in contrast to the 6 or 8-inch lap siding, 6-inch lap siding on the main portion of the building. This is looking on the Jackson Street elevation. Jefferson Street elevation. The previous was more minimalist of the front porch with the panels. What we see in the current is a little more robust porch, as the cornice on the top of the building is a little more identified, and once again it has been revised to include the 4-inch hardy board cement board siding. This is a 3D at the corner, showing the new materials. I just want to specifically read what the board approved at the May meeting. The board voted to approve the building as revised by the applicant, but added a condition of approval requiring that the applicant utilize, quote, authentic, historic, smooth finish stucco instead of fiber cement board panels at the breezeway location in the same color as proposed in the revised application. The HRB found that the cement board siding was more consistent with the smooth, hard coating of the church, as well as an acceptable material for the commercial building addition. After deliberation of the issues, the HRB found that the inclusion of 4-inch cement lap siding and use of smooth finish stucco at the breezeway portion of the building presented a building design with materials that were compatible with the church as a landmark, as well as the McLaughlin Conservation District. In the design guidelines that were written in 2006, the purpose of the design guidelines were to give a safe harbor for applicants. I want to build a new single-family home in the McLaughlin District. What do I need to do to get approved? And so the design guidelines were very educational. I mean, they're very large and they go into a lot of detail. And it's really educational based to try to get people to understand what kind of building we're looking for. But it was never meant to be the only way to get approved by the Historic Review Board. The first section specifically says that these are safe harbor guidelines, and alternative designs and materials can always be proposed for approval. The board always knew that there may be a modernist building one day in McLaughlin District or Kenema, and there's always going to be new materials on the market, and you can't write design guidelines to encompass everything. But what they said was the burden of proof goes on the applicant more when you have an alternative design and alternative materials. And through this process, the Historic Review Board found that the applicant did meet those two cases with alternative materials and alternative design. And so I want to reiterate that the guidelines are exactly that, guidelines to allow the safe harbor approval. They're not the only way to gain approval by the Historic Review Board. Hardy cement board paneling has been approved by the board in single-family residential homes since the 2006 adoption. Cedar siding has also been approved. The board likes to see cedar siding, but they haven't made it an exclusive option. So for approval. And so, kind of to summarize, this has gone through a long process. It's had a lot of iteration. At the core, the board has always felt that the design of the streetcar commercial addition with some institutional elements is appropriate for the district and allows it to be contrasting from the historic landmark and compatible with the district. And they fundamentally believe that the whole time. And the applicant has proposed alternative materials, and each time they've accepted those materials. So I'm available for questions, and after my presentation, Paul Falsetto and Jill Long are available, and they'll have a presentation on behalf of the applicant.
In the interest of time, may we just move through the process and reserve questions? Okay, thank you very much. Mike?
I have exhibits here on the record. Thank you.
Okay.
There's 3 exhibits tonight. Exhibit 1 is a letter from Patrick Sweeney. Exhibit 2 is a letter from Rob Dortnack. And exhibit 3 is a letter from Mary Johnson.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I will open the public hearing, and the applicant will be first up. It's 10 minutes going to be adequate.
10 minutes would be fine, thank you. Can I get out of this? Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Commissioners. My name is Jill Long. I'm a land use attorney with Lane Powell, and with me tonight is Paul Falsetto, an architect with Carlton Hart Architecture. We're here tonight representing the applicant, the Atkinson Memorial Church. This evening, Paul and I will be sharing the applicant's presentation time to present the revised education wing project. However, before we begin with our presentation, I'd like to take just a minute to recognize all the people here tonight that are here in support of the Atkinson Memorial Church. Many of them are wearing pink buttons, but I'd like to just ask them to stand for a really brief second and show their support for the church. They're not going to be testifying tonight, so this is their moment to show that they've come in support of the church. Thank you very much for being here. In our presentation this evening, we're going to focus on the criterion that was remanded in the previous City Commission appeal hearing and that was approved by the Historic Review Board most recently. And that would be the criterion related to general compatibility of the exterior design, arrangement, proportion, detail, scale, color, texture, and materials proposed to be used in the construction of the new building or structure. That will be our focus tonight. We'll be demonstrating how the HRB's decision to approve the revised design is compatible under the city criterion, and how it's compatible with not only the historic landmark, but also the surrounding historic neighborhood. We're going to break down our presentation this evening into 3 sections. I'll start with some background and history on the project and move pretty quickly through that because I think everyone's fairly familiar
Then I'll hand it over to Paul, who can talk about the changes in the design and specifically materials, compatibility, and answer any questions you might have on a technical nature on the architectural standpoint. And then third, we'll provide some closing comments. Please feel free to ask us questions during our presentation. We'd be happy to address any concerns as we're going along. So a little project background and history. This is a site, just a different aerial view, but it gives you a chance to look at the existing historic landmark building, the Atkinson Memorial Church. To the left of that is the existing preschool building. It's an old house. It's a non-contributing resource to the district. That will be demolished with this project, and there is where the new education wing will be built. The education wing is going to serve three main purposes. One is to provide more effective and efficient classroom space for the Oregon City Preschool. Currently it's in woefully suited space for young children for a preschool in the old house. The second is to provide appropriate religious education and Sunday school classroom space for the members of the congregation. And third is to provide ADA accessibility to the church, providing a new elevator that will allow wheelchair-bound members to enter the church in a safe location and ride an elevator to enter the church. This slide shows you just a little site context. It was important to the church in analyzing this project to be very thoughtful and thorough in their design and to look at the neighborhood to find materials and compatibility. You'll see here a number of houses and institutional buildings in the surrounding vicinity that allow a variety of different materials and architectural design elements that were incorporated into the educational wing. The site gives you a sense of the variety in the neighborhood. It provides for very rich architectural character throughout this historic neighborhood and allows the education wing to fit nicely within the area by utilizing a variety of design characteristics. Moving on to the next, sorry about that. The next slide shows three specific precedent examples that were really focused on by the church in designing the wing. First is the Carnegie Center. It's the play of the wall, projection, and inset, and obviously the brick material. To the right on top, we have the Anderson House with the welcoming porch and the lat siding material. And then the Erminger House at the bottom, the clean, classic proportions. And as we move along, we've got some slides that really incorporate visually how those elements are tied into the education wing. This is the site in the immediate context from a visual perspective. At the bottom, you'll see the two immediately adjacent views in the neighborhood. Two very significant Oregon City community resources are close to this project. The Cox Park, with looking across directly from Jefferson Street, and then also the Carnegie Center, looking across from 6th Street. This project not only benefits the members of the church and the community that uses the preschool, but also the community as a whole by providing a soft background to these community resources that will benefit the entire community. The education wing provides a compatible historic remodel that will fill out this area and allow for a complementary background to the existing uses. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and some expert testimony we've gotten on that subject as we move on. But this gives you a nice visual to look at those two community resources and know that it was very important to the church to protect those resources and enhance them through their project. And I'll turn it over now to Paul.
Go back to this really quickly. We've got a long site here along a pretty important street. So what we've decided to do is kind of break up the massing in the feel of the building. And so there's a part, that's the transition zone, that's serving the church. It acts as a transition to both the church and the education wing. And then as we move, in this case, leftward, we wanted the building to feel more like it's of the neighborhood. This neighborhood is principally residential. So I'm going to go through all these slides. Christina's already showed some of these to the compare and contrast slide, which I think is a particularly good one right here. And so I'll just give a brief history. We went to the HRB for a design assist process, and the transition zone was stucco, including the breezeway, and these panels are stucco. And they said, we don't see a lot of stucco in the neighborhood. We see wood and we see brick. Why don't you do something more like that here? So we said, okay, we'll do brick. We got brick across the street. we wanted to keep this little breezeway as quiet as you can. That's just, it's deeply inset. You're really not going to see it all that much. It's going to be in shadow and back. So we actually we went to this design in which we said, all right, we're going to get rid of stucco. We're going to have brick right where we see it, right in these two massings. This goes to, and this is a hardened cement board. This is not stucco in this previous design. This is a hardened cement board as well, as is that. And this is that hardy lap siding. Well, at the remand, it was mentioned that this probably feels a little less appropriate for the neighborhood. We agreed, so we went ahead and changed the design, and we brought back this lap siding because this education wing really wants to be more of the neighborhood. It wants to be more of the residential portion of the neighborhood. And we still kept the hardy panel here because we want this breezeway to be a minimal connection. HRB said, get rid of the hardy panel here, go back with stucco. Well, we're happy to do that, so we have stucco there. We've got the hardy panel here. And actually, Joe, I don't know if you can look at that panel, but here's an example. This stuff, it's appropriate in a lot of uses, including in historic districts. This is that's the actual material. You can see how deeply set back it is. It's got a 5/8 inch setback, even more so than wood siding. Creates a nice shadow line. That's the 4-inch exposure. Painted to what might be that color, kind of a neutral color. And that's what we're proposing doing.
Hardy plank.
Hardy plank, yeah. Or you can call it a siding, lap siding. This, as Commissioner Nacita said, it is a fiber cement board. So it's a mixture of concrete and cementitious materials with wood. Fine. Here's our break. Yeah. You're stronger than I. So here's a visual example of what that looks like with the deeper exposure and the tighter exposure. Both materials are considered acceptable in city statutes. Composite siding is what they tend to call it here. Guidelines say fiber siding are materials which have the appearance of horizontal wood siding. This is something the city has approved. And so here you can kind of see how we've laid it out, where this transition zone does want to feel like it's part of the church, it's serving the church, it's providing accessibility into the church. Classroom wing wants to be of the neighborhood. Here in the corner, we've got the previous, this is Jefferson Street, so the east elevation. We were told this just doesn't feel neighborly enough. We want something that's a little bit more of the neighborhood, so we went back with this design, and I'll show you here why. You can see when we look at the Andreessen house, it's got a nice, strong, solid porch, and it's an asymmetrical porch, actually. The entryway is off to the right. And at the Ermatinger house, it's also asymmetrical as well. The door is off to the left. And we thought, well, that's very interesting. We're going to take that as our cue. So we created, something that feels more house-like, more porch-like, less commercial, and has that sort of asymmetry in the porch. I'm going to hand it over now to Jill to kind of conclude.
Do you have any questions on any of the materials or deciding them? Please, what do you think?
I'd like you to finish.
Okay, no problem. I'd like to conclude with just noting a couple of items in the record that came in, one previously from the State Historic Preservation Office, and another one from the architect who wrote the Oregon City Design Guidelines. On the State Historic Preservation Office, I'd just like to take a quick moment and read her comments, because I think they speak volumes from an expert's perspective. I feel that the new addition is simple and compatible design with the church. Features that make it especially compatible are the 1-story in height with limited connection to the half-story higher breezeway to the church itself for ADA access. The design is modern and not competing with the church. Location to the side of the church and the relatively long facade along 6th Street is broken up into discernible groupings that is made cohesive in color and materials chosen. She goes on to conclude that the design meets the Secretary of Interior's standards and recommends a favorable approval. Oops. The next expert testimony we have is from Robert Dortnack. I won't read the whole letter. I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at it. But again, this is somebody who's intimately familiar from an expert standpoint with the design guidelines. Is an outside party. He's not hired by the applicant or the appellant, and has just provided his opinion. I'll summarize and conclude with saying that we really urge the City Commission to respect the process that the Historic Review Board has gone through twice with the applicant in approving this design. It has been over 5 months of very active work, and a lot of time and resources by the church has been put into this with a very honest intent to do the right thing by the neighborhood. We firmly believe that this design is that. The Historic Review Board also believes that and has decided it twice, and the experts have weighed in and decided it. I'll conclude with just reading the last paragraph from Mr. Dortnack's letter. I encourage the City Council to support the Historic Review Board and the neighborhood's joint support for the project, and to look for a positive resolution and approval. The design meets the guidelines intent. We're here today to discuss how this project meets the design guidelines intent, and we ask you respectfully to approve the application as approved by the Historic Review Board. Thank you.
Do you have a question? Councilor West.
I was just, okay, the Hardy Plank, the last siding, is for the education center, but the breezeway is gonna be what, smooth stucco?
Yeah, it's gonna be stucco is what the HR, I'll put it right back here. The
So I lost you on that, the breezeway.
Yeah. And you lost me anywhere.
This, what the material of the breezeway is,
Okay.
does it have the horizontal siding, the black?
It's a good question, and no, it doesn't. And it originally was actually this hardy board, which you buy as a board material. If you put on the wall, you paint it, you're done.
Right.
And HRB says, no, we want stucco. Stucco is you actually put a backer board up, you put a green coat, a scratch coat, a brown coat, a finish coat, you paint that. And that is something that's really going to look and feel actually like the card coating on the church.
Okay.
It's something when you see a period stucco house,
Yeah.
that's what they do pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what's gonna be on the front.
That's what's going to be on the breezeway, both sides.
Okay, clarifying questions, Commissioner Nealon?
Was any thought given to having the breezeway, the actual same tone, same color as the church itself?
And the church, of course, is a color that's not its original color. It's called the coral brown, but it has since pretty much faded to a pink. Yeah, so you like pink. We actually wanted to pick a brick color that was really felt both compatible to the church and a little bit different. And so what we did is we picked the breezeway color based on the brick color. And so we thought we want that whole head, that whole transition zone, including the breezeway, to feel like one element here. And the material is compatible enough in color that it would work well with the church and actually act as a transition. We don't really want it to feel like the church has a tail, and this is part of the tail. We want this to be its own sort of thing that is compatible to the church itself.
Okay, let's move on then. Thank you very much. This is an opportunity now for the appellant to come forward. You also have an opportunity for 10 minutes to ask questions.
My name is Mary Johnson. I represent Margaret Foss, who is the appellant. My address is 500 Avenue Road, Oregon City, Oregon, 97045. As Mr. Nishiga pointed out earlier this evening, this is a very important decision to the city and especially our local historic district. Overarching the dispute over style materials in this case is an important definitional consideration. One is what is being built. It's an addition. It's an addition to a church that's on the National Historic Register. It is all one building. It is not a separate building. The other thing we have to consider is this heightened burden of proof on the applicant if they want to propose alternative materials and designs that are not in the guidelines and are not part of the designs and materials that already have been determined to be appropriate in this historical district. This is essentially a local issue. The national guidelines are there nationally. The state looks at things for the state, but we're looking at the application of these guidelines in our local historic district. And the challenge here tonight is, do our local guidelines, where we have poured our hearts and souls into making and applying for years, do they really mean what they say? On a very much smaller scale, this is like the BP oil disaster. The regulators did not apply existing law, and what do we get? An oil spill. Here, if the regulators don't apply the guidelines that we have for our local historic district, we lose the historic resources of the district. That's the importance behind what's going on tonight. What we got that's being proposed is a modern commercial building with a strong horizontal line. This is not appropriate for our historic district. While it is true that a lot of historic buildings get additions that are very modern and very jarring, they are not in historic districts. The other issue that I think we're struggling with is, what are we talking about? What are the elements here that we're free to look at? Well, I went back and looked at the Oregon City Historic Resource Form for the church. And it says the exterior features are its early 20th century Gothic revival style, with strong vertical lines and a sense of great height. The shape of the building is a symmetrical ellipse with a stucco interior and a cement foundation. It has a gabled composition roof. Now, I hope you all know what gables are. They're the triangle pieces that stick out from a side or a front. Okay, this one, the church has gables. It has a composition shingle roof, and it has especially a low-pitched triangular gable on the front of the building. It has these huge, beautiful stained glass windows. It also has pointed arched windows with tracery. Now, tracery are lines across glass. It also has wood 1/1 double-hung windows. And those 1/1 double-hung windows have hood moldings, which is a concrete piece over the top of the window. There's a prominent tower. The prominent tower features a pointed arch entry. The long facades on the existing church are relieved by recessed panels, so the walls are in, with flat pilasters. Now, a pilaster looks like a column, but it's flat. You see them on the Abernethy Center. Okay. It also has what's called a simple castellated parapet. Okay, a parapet is the short wall on top of the roof, a short wall. And a castellation is, it looks like a castle, you know, it goes up and over and down and over and up and over and down and over where they used to stick the guns out. Okay, that's a castellation. It's made like a castle. And then on top of the castellations are little pinnacles. Okay, those are the design elements of the church. Now, the guidelines require the property to be one style. It's very clear through those guidelines, one style. What the applicant is doing here is combining what used to be 3 lots into one. We have one lot, one style. So we're pretty much stuck with Gothic Revival. However, for an addition, it needs to be a simpler expression of the elements and a simpler expression of the materials. If we apply that to this situation, in my letter of July the 6th, I set forth some considerations for conditions of approval. The exterior of the building, that's the church and the addition, ought to be one unified stucco. It ought to be one unified predominant color. And the color ought to be the original color of the church, which was this gray, like it looked gray here all winter, or some other early color that it could have been, since it's, you know, not now a historic color. The long facade on 6 ought to be framed by a belt course. Now, the church has a belt course. It's like a long horizontal at the top and then also one at the bottom, which breaks up the long vertical height. So you could put a belt line at the bottom of the parapet around the top. You could make your windows need to be taller than they are wide, and you could put a belt line at the bottom, which would break it up. And then in between the windows needs to be a flat pilaster. Doesn't need to be exactly like the church, it just needs to be simple, plain. The parapet doesn't need to be castellated. You don't need to put pinnacles on it. You just do a very simple one. The smaller windows ought to be 1/1 double hung. And you could do a plain hood molding. The hood molding can be concrete, it could be stone, it could be wood, but it just needs to be plain, wide hood molding. The doors can be simple, rectangular, recessed, double hardcore doors. Put a low-pitched triangular pediment, which is the face of a gable, is called a pediment, over the top of the door. Then on the porches, gable the porches. And put columns that are either stone or cement columns that would be compatible. Then you've got a building that is totally compatible. It is not, as staff has characterized our appeal as wanting a cookie cutter. That is not what we want. We want a building that's going to fit in the neighborhood. It's going to be one style and it's going to be compatible, and you're not going to confuse the new addition from the old historic building. So these are objective things that we could look at: the exterior finish, the color, a belt course, the parapet, the panels being resourced, pilasters, windows, doors, gable to roofs. These are not expensive changes, and they're very different from the alternative design and materials, which is a hodgepodge of a bunch of different styles, that if it was a different building not associated with this church that's on the National Historic Register, we may be talking other things. But certainly, the lap siding doesn't belong, the brick doesn't belong, the industrial windows, the 7-Eleven look of the building, that just doesn't belong in this historic district. If we want to have a future for our historic district that gets on the National Register of Historic Cities or Historic Districts, we've got to be very careful what we're doing here. Let's not be blinded by the excitement of having a big development happening during the recession in our city. Thank you.
Is there questions for Commissioner Neely?
If you did away with the breezeway, do you have any problem with the architecture as presented?
It's not one style. Yes, I do. It's
So
not one
if you
style.
did away with the breezeway, you still have the problem.
It's one site. It's one site, it's one property, and it's associated with it.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We will invite the public to speak next, and I have 2 speakers sign up. Is that all so far? If not, you might want to get your cards in. Okay, Kimberly Walsh is first, followed by Patrick Sweeney.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Walsh. I live in Oregon City. I'm both a neighbor and employed at Atkinson Memorial Church, and I'm here today to urge you to deny the appeal of the HRB's decision regarding the addition to Atkinson Memorial Church. And I have 2 points I want to make tonight. The first one is that pleasing everyone with the design is difficult. However, this is not about reaching a unanimous public decision. This is about what the church wants, and does their design meet the criteria. And the criteria that we're addressing tonight is one of compatibility. And I think the architect and staff have already gone over how that fits in. And I agree with that it's compatible both with the current church and with the surrounding neighborhood. The second point that I'd like to make is that although, when you first think about it in addition, you kind of think, yeah, it should be the same as the building. And some of the criteria that I think has been talked about is in response to the smaller house. Adding on, you want to keep the same style if it's a house, but we're talking about a large addition, and I think it actually qualifies as a new building. I mean, it kind of falls in between. And so looking at the Secretary of the Interior and the standards that they apply nationally, you don't want it to look exactly the same because it degrades the integrity of the historic building. You want to make sure that that is separate. And I know that there's, Mary Johnson's given some examples in one of her applications, I think it's 402 and 423, where there's been additions using similar materials. And I didn't know they were additions until that was pointed out. So I think it's important to remember that you want it to be compatible, but you also want it to be different so that there's no mistake what's historic, what's not historic. The national guidelines also talk about, and this is for Exhibit 401 of Mary Johnson's paperwork, where it says it's not recommended that this is what's not recommended. Using the same wall plane, roof line, cornice height, materials, siding, lap, or window type to make additions appear to be part of the historic building. So, for these reasons, as well as many stated in the staff report and by others, I ask you to deny the appeal of the HRB's decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Sweeney.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Sweeney. I reside at 801 5th Street, 3 houses away from the proposed site. I urge you guys tonight to uphold Ms. Foster's appeal. I am here tonight to voice my concerns related to the Atkins Memorial Church addition. As a resident of the McLaughlin neighborhood, I am at a loss as to how the proposed architectural plans are fit for my neighborhood. Since my neighbors and I have learned of these architectural plans, we have been saddened not by the growth of the church, but rather by the missed opportunity to add to Oregon City's wealth of historical charm. We believe this is a fantastic opportunity for the church to complement our wonderful city's unique character. I don't have an architectural background, like was said earlier, but I do have an understanding of the neighborhood's unique and historical features. I can't understand how such architectural plans could be deemed acceptable for our community. There are several concerns I do have with the addition. Though it has been argued that the design of the addition needs to avoid interfering with the original Gothic style of the church, this is no excuse to accept such a sterile design for our most important historic part of Oregon City. I believe the addition could be a different style and still cosmetically fit the age of the church. Unfortunately, the intended design has been created to contrast the historic church with a homogenized modern style of architecture, and in my opinion, does a disservice to the historic value of the Gothic church it will sit next to. Instead, we should ask the question, new building honor our town's history rather than trying to cheaply modernize it? Why not imitate from a plethora of vintage 20th century style buildings to differentiate from the Gothic style? Why can't we ask the church to do at least design the exterior facade to look historic without conflicting with the Gothic church and the Gothic style church? Wouldn't this be more appealing than a modern design? Another issue I have with the addition is the lack of concern with the architecture of vintage homes it's surrounded by. Our McLaughlin neighborhood is comprised of many vintage architectural style homes from the early 20th century, including Gothic revivals, Queen Anne's, Georgian colonials, and craftsman bungalows, and these were not presented by the architect. These homes are each little gems to add to our city's charm. I can't help but feel this new proposed architecture won't fit in with the majority of the residential homes in the area. Due to the central location in the very heart of our historic McLaughlin neighborhood, the addition will represent a monumental decision for years to come. This modern-looking addition would work out on the edge of town, but not in the middle of our historic living room, as quoted from a board member in another meeting. We need to protect one of our most important resources, which is our history and neighborhood charm. This convenience store-style architecture in no way fits with the McLaughlin neighborhood. The proposed design has not been proven to match the materials of historic homes it is surrounded by. I believe the newer material proposed for the facade won't add to the style and quality of the neighborhood. These exterior materials have no historic value. Imitation, synthetic, or faux wood planks are going to be used to serve more in a probably easy maintenance and painting upkeep. None of the windows are made of wood sash or multi-pane design. Paint colors aren't historic, yet no one knows or cares whether these materials, what they will look like next to our neighborhood homes. While I have concerns with the process itself, it saddens me to know that the local neighbors who live closest, right next to the church, have had our voices drowned out by our local neighborhood association, who should be acting on behalf of its concerned citizens, and also the lack of protection the Oregon City Historic Review Board has given the historic McLaughlin neighborhood. The HRB should be serving as a watchdog for historic value, and instead has lobbied for the contrasting of what I definitely see as a modern design, which in no way adds to our vintage charm. Finally, those of us who are in disagreement with the new design are supportive of the church's endeavors in our neighborhood, but don't believe their chosen architectural style fits the neighborhood's historic character. By speaking up on what we feel is architecturally right, we hope to come to an agreed upon design to add to the community that we love so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others who come tonight to speak to this? Okay, then this is an opportunity for the applicant to have a rebuttal.
Thank you. It's very tempting when architectural plans are laid on the table to pick up a pen and give your opinion, want to make a change. We all have personal opinions about style and aesthetics, and it's human nature to provide those and wish for those. However, the city has a process for the historic review of buildings in this neighborhood, and we have to honor that process. Mr. Dortnack said it very well in his letter when he said design by committee doesn't work. When you have too many cooks in the kitchen, or I could probably think of a lot of different sayings, but the outcome isn't optimal. And what the design guidelines were meant to do was to provide creativity and flexibility to the architect to work in concert with the Historic Review Board to come up with an optimal project. A project that works in the best way to be compatible with the neighborhood, and in this case with the historic landmark that it's an addition to. There is no requirement for one style on the site. In fact, I think one style may not satisfy the state historic preservationists who commented that the modern style of the addition was particularly important in making it appropriate for the preservation of the historic landmark. We have you before you tonight a variety of experts and your historic review board that have approved this application. And we ask that you listen to those opinions and that you honor the decision of the historic review board. I'm going to let Paul talk really briefly on a couple of specifics that were brought up earlier.
There's a variety of standards that we address, national, statewide, and especially this wonderful document, Oregon City Historic District's Guideline for New Construction. And if you will, I'm going to read a few things to kind of offer rebuttal here. On page 7, it says, and it lists some principles, and it says, these principles shall guide new construction to be compatible with existing historic resources, yet offer strategies that can incorporate new materials and products. New construction is just that. It is not historic, nor does it attempt to be historic, but rather to stand side by side with existing historic structures in a respectful manner. And that was our mantra on this project. And that's what we tried to do. And within the time allowed, they have commercial building styles. We're in an MUC1 district, and so there's residential on behind us, and there's a institutional across the streets. And so, if we're designing a commercial building style, it says for materials and finishes that are the safe harbor approved includes cement, plaster, stucco, brick, concrete with plaster over, horizontal board siding. They very purposely didn't say wood siding. They said it was horizontal board siding. They wanted to keep that open, as Christina mentioned earlier. Also, ornamentation. They say new buildings should not overstate the historic style reference. That's page 49. And finally, and that actually might be the last one. So I kind of want to leave it at that. This became our Bible, if you will, in designing this building. I think we addressed it. The fellow that helped write it feels the same way. The Historic Review Board that approved it twice. So we did the best job we can. We're pretty happy with the end result. We look forward to starting the process when allowed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll close the public hearing. And now is an opportunity for the commission to ask questions and deliberate. Commissioner Neely, you begin.
My first question is to the attorney, but after he finishes, we'll take the most figure was out of state.
If I may, Commissioner Neely, I also have a question of the city attorney. So I was wondering if you could break this down into the procedural questions that everybody has to the city attorney, and then the more substantive questions.
So we don't want to get the attorney to such a question.
All we know is procedure. You don't want us designing anything.
No, that's right.
Okay, questions for the attorney.
We need a very specific remand that had to deal with materials which seems to be addressed by the Historic Review Board, whether we agree with it or not, as going to be a discussion point. We have elements from the original appeal that are coming in this appeal. Are there any issues with that?
I don't believe so. Okay. What you have is, a design before you and doesn't meet the criteria, which is compatibility. Very short.
Okay, my question was actually almost identical, but I have a little bit different slant on it. That is whether there are one or two issues raised in this appeal, the criterion approval criteria and a procedural criteria, because I did notice when I spoke earlier about my concern that this appeal is coming to us not taking into account what we specifically decided on the first appeal. I had not really spent really a lot of time with the appellant's document. That concern was something that it had come to my attention by my own viewing of the tapes of the previous HRB appeal. And that's when I noticed that this commission's decision was basically ignored. But I do notice now, this afternoon, I'm spending time with the appellant's document on page 2, and the paragraph that begins the discussion. The appellant does basically say, quotes, with specificity that on remand from the City Commission on this very issue of compatibility, the Historic Review Board essentially ignored the instructions from the City Commission regarding the inappropriateness of the exterior design and materials. So I'm just wondering, when we make findings to make a decision tonight, I do wonder if there are one or two issues right now.
My thought would be that there's, the appeal raised one issue, incompatibility. I think that would be a sub-issue of, how you handle compatibility if the commission believes that the Historic Review Board didn't take your direction into account when it made its decision. That could be part of why you find it incompatible if that were the way that the commission were to go.
So the freedom that we have this evening is to take any piece and add a condition, or adopt any sweeping motion. So we really have a lot of leniency within the compatibility criteria.
I think that the only thing I would add to that is that when we came up on the first appeal, there were a limiting of the criteria. There were 2 appeal issues. And so the commission remanded back on materials. And so instead of just saying materials could be raised, we broadened it to be compatibility under the idea that the applicant could change the materials and that could change another component, right? I mean, materials could change roof pitch or windows could change. So we broadened it to include the whole world of compatibility. And so that's sort of what's before you now.
Okay. Any more procedural issues for the attorneys? All right, let's get into the discussion then. Commissioner Neves.
The whole McLaughlin neighborhood is eclectic. Many designs, many features in it. I'm rather impressed with the effort that's gone into bringing in compatible features with several of the historic properties that are in the area. Explicitly pointed out the library with the Carnegie Center, which is functioning temporarily, and the Anderson House, Young Thayer House. I think a great deal of care was given to make it compatible, at the same time having its own unique feature. I'm sure the site at one time was composed of separate lots and has been combined together into a common lot, but I don't personally feel that means what structures need to go into it or have to be basically the same kind of design. They're not. And I think a great deal of effort has been made. My recollection of our remand essentially dealt with material. What I saw was cement blockings that were, as I pointed out at the time, the design covered them with trees, so I couldn't see them. And I think this was dealt with very well. I think my concerns have been basically met personally.
Commissioner Nocita.
My concerns that I expressed in the first appeal were prefaced by another aspect of the way I think compatibility needed to be thought of in this particular instance. We've been discussing the fact that there's compatibility with the church, compatibility with the surrounding neighborhoods. I raised the issue of compatibility with the square, Carnegie Square, and the interaction with Carnegie Square. One of the key aspects of the church in this context is the fact there is a very significant interaction by the church with the square itself, and it kind of forms the capstone of the building wall around Carnegie Center. And I raised the point that that in particular the bump outs, the way the flat blank exterior of those bump outs was very inconsistent with the way the church itself interacts with the public space, and really didn't interact with the public space at all. Having said that, I've got to say that what's happened with the revised drawing doesn't satisfy me, and the fact that the HRB and staff and the applicant have come back to this commission with the same materials, the fibrous cement that we indicated in the first appeal was not compatible. I can't change my mind on that. However, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, in my discussions with various architects on this matter, I had some thoughts that I think, could work the parties towards some kind of meeting of the minds here, and meet the compatibility standards that I don't think are met now. And I'd ask the favor of Mr. Falsetto if he could put back up on the screen that the one drawing that has the two versions, one on top of the other. Okay. Because I think this is an option that could be done very inexpensively and get a lot of mileage and address my concerns about compatibility and maybe address at least some of the concerns of the appellant. And that is, you know, both of those designs basically still present on the addition very blank space to a very important public space. In fact, the second design is still hiding the bump outs behind trees. What I discussed with some architects was a simple matter that recalls, I think, in what Ms. Johnson presented, a very simplified extension of a Gothic theme, but not to overwhelm the original church theme. One of, and that is this: the stucco material on the church. It's smooth, but it's not flat. It's basically defined by relief. It gives the eye, you know, some variation, and it frames something very powerfully visually, which is the Povey window. And what I discussed, and this is where the discussion of the Maybach arch came up, was that on the bump outs, instead of what either design has, a third option, which is basically taking, and this kind of goes back to what the church's original application was for fine stucco on the bump outs, like in the breezeway, basically to evoke the relief of the stucco on the original church facade, and do something which is probably minimalist and modernist, is to take a relief of pointed arch into those bump out faces and do something visually with them to give that interplay with the street and the public square in the form of a mural, of a form of a mosaic with maybe some kind of little fountain cell or something, but just something that gives, that doesn't detract from the church, but gives, you know, it evokes the church, and maybe give an arch figure to the main entrance of the building, a glass arch, so you'd have a rhythm from the church with its pointed arches, some squares, another arch, some squares, another arch, some squares, another arch, some squares. So in addition to the rhythm of inset and relief, you have a rhythm of Gothic arch, square, Gothic arch, square, going across with something very visual in the bump out to give it some presence, something distinct and artistic, rather than what I'm still concerned is for that profound public space, something which is still very blank and made of materials that I don't find to be, again, I can't go, you know, against what my concerns in the first hearing. So, when the applicant has proposed stucco with an exterior, you know, the smooth stucco that's in the breezeway, you know, I think that if it was feasible for you to do in the beginning, which you proposed, I think, I mean, the inference could be that the use of stucco would be appropriate, that you would consider it appropriate still. So that is one way I think that, you know, there could be some coming to a meeting of minds between the parties in the thematic compatibility of design, while still the variation of what is modern, which again, as I mentioned in the first hearing, I didn't have a problem with. That would be my suggestion as far as discussion on the way to move forward. So I would leave it at that and allow my colleagues to comment on that and if the applicant wants to respond or the appellant wants to respond to that, I would welcome any comments as well.
Commissioner West.
We started out with, in 2006 by City Council adopting these historic guidelines. Granted, we didn't write them, but we worked on them. And we thoughtfully looked them over. And the guidelines, when we put those in place, they were meant to be just that, a guideline. And I'm agreeing with the architect. They were designed to give creativity and flexibility for the architect. So, that being said, I respect Rob Dortnack's and Joyce Sears' professional opinions weighing in on this difficult subject matter. So, that being said, when you came back tonight, I'm very pleased to see your changes. The building is much softer, less austere, and I like I appreciate the sensitivity to the details that you've added in changing some of the materials. And this whole issue reminds us, some of you, I don't know, maybe weren't here with us when we picked out the artwork for the McLaughlin Promenade and the waterfalls, which have many other various nicknames throughout the community. But what I think was important to know is that we had set up a process and a way we were going to decide it, and we followed it. And so everyone has had opportunity to have their input at neighborhood association meetings, historic review board here. And so I felt like the process is in place, and that, in my opinion, the design meets all the criteria that we have asked for. Thank you.
Thank you. So my screen back up here. I guess as the final speaker, I agree with my colleagues, Commissioners Neely and Wes, and that the design elements and the changes that the applicant made to the building, all of a sudden to me tonight, it was, it looks like a school. It looks like an education wing, and it never did before. And I just agree, it works better. And I guess the issues that I have with and of course the neighbors have to live with it too. And to follow along with Commissioner West's example of the waterfront, the thing that I like to tell people about artwork is that if you consider the city a gallery, we'll have art here and here and here and here and here. I may not like this piece, but I'll certainly love this piece. This one's but this one's really fine. And I think that's the same way with architecture. I'm not going to like all that you like, but the fact of having many different styles to work on and the interplay, I think that you have set in motion and the rhythm of the neighborhood. This, which you've presented tonight, satisfies that for me. And again, the process is good. I wish that, I think Commissioner Nacita's ideas and objections and issues would resonate more with me if other architects or historic preservationists or even anyone on the historic review board had that kind of issue. And I know some of the neighbors do, and I totally respect that and understand that. Anyway, I'm ready to vote on it and allow the applicant to go forward.
I'll put forward the motion. For clarification, the artwork on the waterfront being referred to as representing the falls, I refer to as a shoehorns. But in any case, I support it.
We all know that's one opinion, don't we?
Yes, I move to deny the appeal.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner West. Is there further comment or discussion? Okay, Kelly, the vote, please.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Nacita?
No.
Mayor Norris?
Aye. Motion passes 3-1. Yes. And thank you all for your patience, and we'll take okay.
My
Yeah, got it. Like we will continue our meeting, please. And the next item on the agenda is the consideration. Oh, actually, we have a leftover agenda item generated by a question that Commissioner Smith asked at the last meeting about where our historic descriptions went after the 1983 thing. So anyway, our historic expert, Christina. Tony?
Real quick before I hand it off,
Is your microphone on?
Okay,
great, thanks.
So we put together kind of a background and overview, and to try and address some of Commissioner Smith's concerns that he raised concerning the inventory forms. So what I propose, Christina did prepare a memo for you. We're going to walk through that memo. If you have any questions, we'd certainly be happy to answer them. You know, if this is something that we need to follow up with, maybe it might be appropriate to schedule a work session for that. We can certainly do that. And once you've had a chance to hear this and kind of walk through and read the memo with a little bit more detail, and we can schedule that at your direction. So I'll turn it over to Christina to kind of walk through a few things put together for you.
Thank you, Tony.
All right, thank you. Mayor and Norris Commissioners. This is in response to Commissioner Smith's comments. And what I tried to do in my memo is the more big picture about the survey process, and then after explanation, I'm kind of open to answer specific questions. And then, as commented by Tony, this may need to go into a work session meeting. So the big picture now, we'll move down.
Sure.
In Oregon, we get our inventory form guidelines from the Historic Preservation Office, and they've changed over the years. I think in the last 12 years I've been doing preservation, there's been 3 different guidelines, and so they're always updating them about what we want on it, what we don't want on it. And in Oregon City, we've been doing inventories since the early 80s. And the last back page, I have a list of all the ones that I know.
1880s? Or
those are different kinds of inventories. And so you'll see if you look on the inventories, which almost all of them are available online, and you can access them if you go to www.orcity.org, click on the Planning Division page, and then you'll see a smaller historic drop-down menu, and you can get access to all the inventory forms there from that drop-down menu. And I want to say I love the new website because I was really able to utilize it to finally get all those inventory forms. We had some online, but this was a chance for me to get as many as I could online. So I'm very excited to finally allow the public to get access to all this great information. The way the Historic Preservation Office looks at inventory forms now is into 3 categories, and you can see that on page 3 of the chart. It says RLS, ILS, and NR, and it's kind of hard to read, but I took this off of their guideline packet, and I have a link available on this memo, and if you want the link, Kelly will be able to get that to you in an electronic version of this memo. But the way the inventories are handled is the first level is a reconnaissance level survey, which is the RLS. The next level is an intensive level survey, which is the ILS, and then finally the National Register. And so think of this first as a single house. So an RLS, a reconnaissance level, which is often called a windshield survey, is I walk through the house, I take a photograph of the front of the house, I have a box that I'm checking off, I write down, lap siding, looks like this is a Craftsman, looks like it's circa 1920s, looks like a bungalow, looks like they enclose a porch. It's taking very quick information. That is then, and today is now uploaded on the Historic Preservation's new Access Database internet program. And what they want out of reconnaissance level surveys is just that. It's just a basic bit of information, and it can be used for many ways. First, it can be used to identify, is an area ready for National Register listing? Do we have enough structures that are contributing in an area that we can create a boundary? Another would be a reconnaissance level survey may say, we inventoried all these buildings in our neighborhood in 1982. What's happened since then? So they can do reconnaissance level, just taking pictures, look at what's changed. What the Historic Preservation doesn't want in these new versions, they don't want you to take kind of the old information from the previous inventory form. Mr. and Mrs. Smith were born in Youngstown, Ohio, and they lived and they worked in the mill. That stays on that old form, and that doesn't go away. The new form is the reconnaissance level form, which is its purpose. And there's some background talk from communities when the Historic Preservation Office proposed this new version. So what are we going to do with all of our information? They said, oh, that stays in that form, that doesn't go away. But we want the reconnaissance level, we don't want to confuse people. We want them to know that this is a reconnaissance level. It's not doing anything more than looking at the current status. The next level is an intensive level survey, which would be a little bit more of what you see from maybe the early 80 inventory forms that we have. There's kind of reconnaissance level plus a little bit of intensive level, which looks at title searches, who owned the property. You really get on site, you maybe look at all 4 elevations of the building, take some photos. You can kind of see in the chart, it takes about 25 to 50 hours. So this is a little more in depth. This is something we would do maybe if we were doing a locally designated building. The final is the National Register nomination. So I'm going to put a house on the National Register, and that's the 100 to 150 hours, and that's the whole shebang. That's doing the exhaustive research, looking at the architectural detail. You are describing all 4 elevations of the building in architectural detail. It's the National Register nomination. So they see that as a continuation. And on another page, you kind of see that, and there's an arrow, and the farther it goes up, the more money it takes, the more hours. And so what the State Historic Preservation Office really likes about reconnaissance level surveys is it gets cities thinking about what do we want to do about preservation, where do we want to spend our money. We want to get kind of the most bang for our buck. We want to figure out where historic areas are. Reconnaissance level surveys can also be used if you are just trying to understand where are our historic areas. Do we have cultural viewscapes that we need to protect? When we are placing city facilities that are areas we want to think about, maybe they're not necessarily going to be historic districts, but maybe through the reconnaissance level survey, we have a better understanding of historic context of other areas of the city. So reconnaissance level have a lot of tools for the city. What we have in Oregon City is a kind of a smattering of different inventories because they've been done between 1883 to 2 years ago. So I think to respond to Commissioner Smith's comments is you have to take each inventory form cumulatively. So if I have a house with a 1983 inventory that has a lot of information on it, and then the Kenema is a great example, and then we had the Kenema resurvey, which was really a reconnaissance level survey. It didn't research the history of the National Register. They would just look at what the existing conditions, and in that case, actually, the Historic Preservation Office used us as their sample program for the first year of doing this. So we actually had the people in charge of the program do Kenema, which is nice. But it is showing today's condition, and so if there are inconsistencies or you feel like there's information missing or not, you would use both inventory forms in concert with each other. And that's why if you look online, you have both of them online for that purpose.
Oh, now wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
On the back, right after it says all forms except for the 1983 inventory are available online.
The 1983, there weren't that many of them, and I've never really been able to accumulate them to get them online. It's been a project of mine to do. I was able to get all the easy ones online. I'm still working to get the 1983 ones. They aren't an easy document to scan. They're kind of hidden in all the inventory forms for downtown. And it's just been a project I want to do and will do when I have time to do it. But for the most part, every inventory we have is available online, especially the new one, which we were able to do last year through the Main Street program, which was not only to reconnaissance level of the 5th through 10th Street, but the whole Main Street Oregon City area. And what I really like about that is it really was able to show that we have historic resources in the north end of downtown, a lot of 1940s industrial era buildings that we weren't thinking about in 1983. So a new inventory gives us new context, new information. Let's see. So that's kind of an overview of what the different surveys are available and how they fit in inventory and where we fit in that. We have a kind of jumble of a lot of them. And over time, the Historic Preservation Office has changed what they want on forms and what they don't want. So you'll see different forms have different pieces of information.
Questions of the team?
So, well, that's actually main question or the main answer I wanted to hear, that all the forms are basically what we use to, as a reference, rather than, my concern obviously was that if the new forms were very minimal in information and those superseded the old forms, that would be a huge problem. So I guess my only other concern then is if the new forms, because you said part of the reason for this is to not confuse people, it confused me enormously. And it confused me enormously because you have a 2009 form that may say the building is built in 1920, and then you have, as a kind of a general guideline, and then you have the old form that says 1912.
Right.
That's confusing. And so I guess my question is why wouldn't, if we know that maybe the date, for instance, is pretty consistent with the old forms, why wouldn't that date carry over onto the new forms? Or also, why would the new forms have spaces for information that isn't transferred over?
Well, the new forms, I'm trying to go from memory on my understanding. I think they're made for both intensive level and reconnaissance, and so things that maybe blank are more intensive level, the way the Historic Preservation Office did it. And the Microsoft Access database, and so kind of do a bunch of drop-down menus. They have this exhaustive thing, is they want to drop-down menus because they want all the data to be the same, and they didn't want people to be typing in. So
some of them are default.
Right, and to speak to your question of, if there's something that is clearly incorrect on an inventory form, which I'm not surprised that there's something. There's so many of them. Some of them were reconnaissance level. The McLaughlin Conservation District was done by Dave Pinyard of Historic Preservation Northwest, and he was the only one who bid on it because of the enormous amount of forms, 800. And he used his graduate students from the University of Oregon Preservation Program. So, we know that there are potentially incorrect information. But luckily, because of ones that are computer-based, I have made changes on the Access database and can recreate new forms. So that is always an option. I've done a couple of times where I've changed information that is clearly incorrect.
So what is the process? What is the process for changing it, and how do we know that the changes are? So, for instance, like the Ermatinger house that I think on one of the forms says has never been moved.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty
that's
a pretty major one. So I think actually the Ermatinger house has two inventory forms, one for its previous location, one for its current location. Okay, so let's say if an owner has done a research on their own house and they find out that their house was built in 1913 and our inventory forms say 1915 or something. What is the process that they would go through, and then how do we determine what is accurate?
Yeah, those are all good questions. So far, the ones I've done as staff, and I've let the Historic Review Board know, have been obvious ones. Right? There's no judgment involved. Let's change it, upload it, create a new one. There are some where people have contacted me and they said that the inventory form's incorrect. My grandfather actually owned the house originally, and I say, well, unfortunately, I have this gentleman's name and the title information. If you want to show that your grandfather originally owned it, please be my guest and bring the information back to me and we can look at it. I never got that information back. So when it's not obvious, then I let the person who's indicated it to me, bring what you have, and the board can look and decide.
And I guess the other question would be if there's information, because some of those old forms are just amazing to read. I've read a lot of them just because the stories, they go into detail where people worked and what they did, and it's incredible. And a lot of those are handed down stories from various people, obviously. So if someone comes and says, here's another, this is what I believe, and they have a way of proving, does the old history get deleted, or is it stays the same and new edition
you just get added. So
gets added
the one we did, I can't remember which one I changed, but it had the house had siding that was asbestos, and it wasn't asbestos, it was cedar, and it was always been cedar. But when you're looking at the sidewalk, it's hard to tell if this was cedar. And so I kept the asbestos and said verified in this date that it was cedar. So I kept the information. We aren't replacing, we're just adding.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you so much for looking into that, because that answered a lot of questions, and I feel so much better about it. Thank you.
Yeah, piece of information that I don't think we've ever had. Yeah, very much. Thank you very much, Christina.
Mayor, just to edify the council some more, we are also going to be putting in an introductory paragraph on our website that explains that, so that when folks like Commissioner Smith look at that, it'll kind of summarize it at the beginning, so we'll...
That's good clarification. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's get back to our agenda then, and we are to consider, as we have a couple of previous meetings, strategic investment zone. This is a tool, economic development tool that was brought to us by the county, and we have a report before us. We've had PowerPoint as well as discussion on it, so we have a resource person here in Renata Mengelberg from County Economic Development, and as you see, the staff is recommending that we do not participate in a strategic investment zone. So I think this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, move to adopt it rather than to accept the staff report. So this is the opportunity to take a stand on that, and then I think we have someone.
Actually, Madam Mayor, I have a... Sure.
And then we have Chief Ed Kirchhoffer here from the fire department, wish to hear what he has to say as well. So, Commissioner Z.
I have an immediate concern. When we last considered this, you proposed, and I think we all agreed with you, that we'd have a public hearing on this.
This is a public hearing. Oh, yes, and
It's not?
It is.
It is? Okay.
It's under public hearing.
All right.
Yeah, it is.
Never mind. Mayor, if I might, I also want to clarify, I just want to clarify in the staff report at the request of one of my county colleagues that we make sure we remind the council that it requires appropriate zoning to get the tax abatement in it, whether you're in urban or rural. And I think you probably are all pretty astute on this and understand that anyway, but I wanted to remind you of that.
Yes, I think the other question that we forwarded was that actually I'd like to hear a little bit of a conversation about is, does it work to carve out a piece of our rural area and to, for instance, in the Dude Creek area, to identify that as a rural zone? I think that was kind of the one outstanding question that we have. So who wants to address that?
That's a question.
Okay, could you want to add on?
Yeah, and the issue came up when we were talking about the Beaver Creek area. Renata was that, okay, it's rural. Let's say we identify that as a strategic investment zone, and what's the guarantee that it ever gets annexed? Let's say the development occurs and the city has no benefit from it because it doesn't get annexed.
Yes, please come forward. Like this one. Or any of our other staff members, I'm not sure who's.
To address your first question about does it make sense to just have a rural zone as opposed to urban, and the rural zone, is there a benefit? I think the rural zone will definitely get a lot of interest because the investment threshold is less. It's 25 million versus 100 million. And since you have significant amount of land identified in your Beaver Creek Road area, yes, it's not annexed yet, but it's been concept planned, and at some point it will be. It's likely. Then having this tool will help attract the kinds of capital-intensive, well-paying employers that I think the city would like to have. So I think it's an effective business recruitment tool. Of course, I'm biased, but that's my view. And let's see the.
You're paid to be biased.
Let me come back to that. Go ahead and identify this rural. What tools do we have that guarantee then that as it's being developed under the $25 million level, that it does get annexed into the city. I mean, what if the landowner does not wish to do so, or what if it is voted down in a annexation? I mean, well, no, we don't get the money. Right. We say that we get the money. Yeah, I'm giving 2 examples.
Doesn't make any difference.
No, I'm giving 2 examples where it doesn't happen.
The property owner would have a strong financial incentive to annex to the city because you couldn't develop the property if it didn't have the proper zoning and the services to the site, which you couldn't do if it's not annexed. What the good citizens of Oregon City may say is open to question, but I think that the idea of well-paying family wage jobs and a high-quality employer plus a high-level investment that will help offset the impacts and provide revenue for the services that everybody enjoys might make a compelling argument.
Commissioner Acita?
I'm going to follow up on Commissioner Healy's question. And it goes back to Beaver Creek. If we were to pass this and Beaver Creek now became a rural strategic investment zone, while it's
You mean just our urban reserve area or Beaver Creek itself?
no, I mean I'm the urban reserve area, the one for which we have a concept plan. Could development take place in the urban reserve area now prior to annexation?
No.
Okay, then my next question then is, if we did annex the area, why wouldn't that be an urban strategic investment zone, because it would now be part of the urban area of Oregon City? I don't see how this rural thing happens.
It is confusing, and it's because of the way the statute is written. And I think you have, I brought copies of the map as well. You have it.
I think we have it.
The statute, the urban area is anything inside the urban growth boundary that Metro had in place in 2002.
Okay.
Everything outside of that boundary is defined as a rural strategic investment zone area.
Okay.
So we don't get to decide, it's set out for us.
Okay. Right, then I'm going to take it to the next level. From what you're saying then, if we pass the urban reserve area as a rural strategic investment zone, the urban reserve area, the Beaver Creek area,
okay,
we adopted that as a rural strategic investment zone, it would remain such after we annexed it into the city of Oregon City?
Yes.
Okay. So then, hypothetically, within the city limits of Oregon City, we could have an urban zone with a threshold of 100 million and a rural zone with a threshold of 25 million, all within the city limits of Oregon City.
Correct.
Okay. So I guess, and it's very convenient that our community development director just walked in. My next question then would become, looking ahead. Tony, okay. So we've established that if we adopted Beaver Creek as a rural strategic investment zone tonight, it would remain such after we annexed it. Mm-hmm. But I guess my question then becomes, goes to the Beaver Creek concept plan, because whatever codes we adopt, I understand, would have to be responsive to that concept plan. And I'll let everybody remind me and inform me of this, because a lot of that happened before my time, the development of all that planning. Would a $25 million investment, which is the threshold, be inconsistent with that concept plan? Because what I understood from people like Rose and what the plan was for that area, it was supposed to be very green. It was supposed to be a lot of green residential development and small kind of like cottage industries and stuff. And even at a $25 million investment, it seems like you're getting to a scale that I think kind of conflicts with what the community envisioned for that Beaver Creek concept planning area?
There were 3 areas, actually.
Right.
That was just one of them.
So that's what Tony responded to.
Within the Beaver Creek concept plan, there were 3 distinct areas of residential, kind of a Main Street office and then an employment industrial area. So between Loader Road North to the north end of the concept plan area, it's been a while, but I believe it was around net 125 to 130 acres of what was defined as employment. Just because you have a $25 million investment doesn't mean it can't be done green. It can't be done green, within the...
Green people want to make money too.
Through that concept, we're really focusing on, sustainability of the infrastructure. How we're going to do stormwater, how we're going to provide water, how we're going to do it in the site. We didn't get into the certification of those industrial buildings, and that code hasn't been written yet. So, is it incompatible? No, I don't think so. I think the intent of that whole concept plan was to provide employment and opportunities.
Commissioner West?
I was withdrawn.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, what do you want to do with this? Mr. Neely.
Well, it's just consider what I'll do with it. Actually, I know the city manager has reservations about it, and I surely think this is something that we don't want to adopt for the bulk of Oregon City. But we've had this industrial land that is annexed, has been annexed for some period of time directly south of the college. We have this, and that's industrial. Then we have this area that's on the east side there, part of which has been annexed, most of which is within our urban reserve area, and nothing really has moved there in either piece. And I think we need to have some movement. I don't think that we alone should be involved in the process of identifying what the potential users are. I hope we can
I can do this in like 5 seconds.
Good luck.
I just think that the annexation should be decided and voted on before we consider entering into something. Simple.
Okay, Commissioner West.
I was going to, I'm not too supportive of this at this time, but not for those reasons. I'm more concerned with the impact of the fire district and the school district and all the other special districts on deferred revenue at this time, especially because a lot of us have bonds and perhaps levies that we'll need to do with some of the districts, and I don't know how this would impact them. And then the other thing is I am interested in what Commissioner Neely and in seeing that property out by the college utilized at its highest level, but I'm hoping that there will be more tools in the toolbox that we can choose from, such as what do you call this, when you state certification of your industrial lands, and maybe there's some partnership opportunities with the county and the state to get those development or
lands ready.
certified industrial site.
Yeah. So, I'm interested in developing it, but not with this technique at this point in time.
Commissioner Smith.
I agree with Commissioner West, and I have a lot of the same questions and concerns that the fire district did, and the school district as well. I don't really have a problem in keeping it in discussion for the future for Beaver Creek, but I'm not interested in doing that now. I think as Commissioner Nocita said, we've been given a pretty clear message from the citizens of Morgan City about annexations, and one annexation did pass, but it was an extremely teeny one. And so it was very clear that people could see the difference between the two. And so I think we have some real issues to deal with within the city limits before we start annexating new land. So I'm not really favorable for it at this point, and may not be favorable towards it in the future. But I'm willing to keep it in discussion.
I'd like to hear from the public. I'd like to open the public hearing, but Mr. Kapazian has.
Yeah, if I could, Commissioner Smith just said something that rang a bell, and you've got to stop working so many places, Rocky. But your job at the school district, this could have an impact on the school district one way or the other.
Sure.
I think it's a potential conflict, which means you just have to disclose it, and you can continue to participate. But
Thank you. I'm an employee of Oregon City School District.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you. If no objections from my colleagues, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone who's come prepared to testify? Chief, you want to testify? You might as well, since you came all this way.
Waited this long.
Right.
Thank you. I'm Ed Kirchhoffer. I'm the fire chief with Clackamas Fire District 1, proud of serving the city of Oregon City. And you have the testimony that the fire district did, and you've been able to review that. I just wanted to add that we value the partnerships we have with the cities we serve. We do have some concerns regarding strategic investment zones as well as other tax deferment strategy or the various forms of economic development tools that are used. We value economic development, obviously, with the communities we serve, but we do need to have some balance in that regard. So we appreciate the opportunity to provide written testimony in advance, appreciate the opportunity to serve the city, and we just trust you to make the right decision. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there others who come this evening to speak? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Continue on. Does anyone have a further discussion or a motion on this?
I would suggest
a
motion. I don't know if we have to take action on this. And so I agree with everybody that has spoken. I think we have to really develop a good vision of what's going to be at Beaver Creek. There may be mechanisms that we can employ and that really don't require any special public financing or support in order to get that to go forward. We'll to see what the outcome of those discussions would be.
I'm actually kind of fascinated by the idea of the urban and rural zones, but I think the biggest hurdle that I'm having, because I've worked, how many hours did I get to spend? 172 hours or something working on urban and rural reserves, and the issues that are so prominent in Clackamas County are trying to not create urban zones in rural areas. And I'm a little bit concerned about the impact of this on the rural area without resolving all those issues we've been talking about for 2 years, governance and annexation into a city, or becoming a city or a village or hamlet. So that's one of the hurdles I'm going to have to get over. I probably won't be sitting around here to vote on this, but I agree with my colleagues too to take a little more time since it's not urgent tonight. So thank you, and thank you very much for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you for your thoughts for now.
Okay, next on the agenda, moving right along, is a discussion, all right, moving to our business agenda. This is another item that was brought to us by the codes. I don't think you did. Okay. This is another item that's brought to us by the county. The vehicle registration fee proposal, which is to initially support the Selwood Bridge. And as you remember from Commissioner Peterson's report, that after 2013, then cities would have the option of using that funding for transportation purposes. And I believe estimated return for a $5 a year vehicle reg fee, 22 to $140,000, if I'm remembering that correctly. So this is just if we wish to do this, would be a declaration of support for this vehicle registration fee. So questions, or how do you want to do it? Commissioner West?
Well, I missed the work session on this, so I might have missed a few details, but I was speaking with Alyssa Gertler from the county today on this, and what I think is interesting, it says, well, first the cities closest to the bridge will contribute the largest share. Well, we're not closest to the bridge, but I see that this is a per vehicle fee, so Oregon City has the second largest population, so that's why we're the second one there. But my thing is if they statistically know that the main users of that bridge are Lake Oswego, Milwaukee, and Happy Valley, then I'm just concerned for Oregon City, even though per capita or per car, we're paying the same thing as everybody else, but collectively, Oregon City is throwing in a bigger piece in the pot there for not using the bridge as much as other pieces, but other places, but Happy Valley is half our size, so I understand it. So I'm just wondering if there would be some kind of weighted average, or, I don't know if this is the fairest way of doing it.
I think what you want to look at is that the Clackamas County share is only 7% of the cost of the bridge in its entirety, and yet we're contributing more than half of the traffic, especially projections. So if you really did a detailed math study, we probably still wouldn't be paying per vehicle an equal share, but we're still trying to be a partner in it. And the county is really trying to look at it as spreading it amongst everyone equally rather than getting down to nickels and dimes.
Right.
That probably wouldn't work out anyway.
And I was thinking that's probably like sometimes when we have like our pavement maintenance there's just a certain way of doing it, and you can't split it all up. But I just wanted to make my point.
Okay. Commissioner Neely.
Another way to look at it is that if the Selwood Bridge becomes even more dysfunctional, we have impacts to the city. We may have greater demands on the 205. People for whom the route might is shorter use the Selwood Bridge may even find it more convenient to go down the Laurel and use the 205. And I guess we have to think, in terms of a more regional sense of what the import is. The point is, this registration fee is for a very specific purpose. It's not intended to augment the budget of the county. It's intended to address a specific need. And I basically support the registration fee.
It's very small, actually, in proportion to a lot of other fees, and I like the idea that's very project specific. And I like the idea also that in 2013 that the city could use an extra $140,000 a year for transportation, and that's also a nice option, I think, for the future.
I think I would want to clarify that the county would continue to collect it until they pay off their bonds, which could be what they would perhaps enact an additional
fee. Oh, sorry. Yes, you know what?
Oh, I missed that.
Yes, it is an additional fee. So right now it's the bridge. Commissioner.
I want to just
Oops. Microphone malfunction. Thank you.
Treating these bridges regionally is a good one. You brought up Commissioner Neely. It's many of us that live wherever we live in the region use all of the bridges, and we also rely on them for freight, getting our goods to our businesses, and people that visit us come for holidays, whatever the case might be. And really, to put the burden of all those bridges on Multnomah County has really been asking a lot throughout the years. So I think Commissioner Neely made a very good point about how it's time to start looking at them in a regional manner.
Okay. Ready for Mr. Smith.
I agree with the same comments. And not only does the traffic get diverted onto 205 if enhanced the Selwood Bridge, but the Oregon City Westland Bridge, Oregon City Bridge. So it could have huge impact on that bridge. Yeah. So I support this.
Okay. Do we have any public that wishes to testify? Okay. Is there a motion?
I move to support the fee.
Is there a second? Second. Moved by Commissioner Neely, second by Commissioner Smith to support the vehicle registration fee. Is there further comment or discussion? Seeing none, Kelly, vote please.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Next is a Resolution 10-16, looking for support from us for the ODOT pedestrian bicycle grant application between the 10th and Main bicycle ped improvements. Yes, Treasurer, I think this is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners again. You may all be aware of the fact that ODOT has a program every 2 years to distribute money to bicycle and pedestrian projects to local governments, counties, cities, even ODOT regional and district offices. And these are specifically for ped bike facilities. At the next round of grants, which will be for funding in 2012-13, they have $5 million, and they've solicited applications for those. And the goals for these grants this time is to create a legacy, to make sure you have a really quality experience for the pedestrian and bicycling community. You have to demonstrate that there's a great need and that it could benefit the whole community. It has to be an important link to the system, and it's important that it would be enhance the livability of the community or contribute to economic stability. So we have been working, as you know, on sidewalk improvements all throughout the downtown. We also have our circulation study we're working on downtown. And one of the things that was pointed out to us in working with all of the Main Street, Oregon City, and various other businesses downtown is that the 10th and Main intersection is very chaotic for pedestrians and bicyclists as well. And they were really, really, really asking if we couldn't come up with some really good pedestrian enhancements for that intersection. And what we've done is developed a project that would essentially build a raised concrete intersection there. I'm sure you've seen them in other jurisdictions. Canby has some, Lake Oswego has some, they're all over. And then we'd also improve the streetscape on 10th Street between McLaughlin Boulevard and just past Main Street. And we'd also build a rain garden down on 10th Street to treat the stormwater runoff. And we would also improve all the ADA, we'd make sure we're compliant with all the ADA standards which are necessary at that intersection. And the other thing we would do is install Shero markings on the pavement
on Main Street so that it would be clear to motorists that they're to share the lane with bicycles. And this is a new technique that is being used, and you'll see it more and more in urban areas, that really clarifies that bikes are part of the road here, and please yield to them, and everybody follows the same rules.
So what we need from the commission is a resolution supporting our application. Obviously, the ODOT doesn't want to receive applications if they don't know they have local government support from the elected body. And so we've prepared a resolution for you that is describes the project, and it's tried to describe how the project meets the goals of this round of grant applications. The funding request is for $266,000. We would have a local match of $47,000. Part of that is a soft match of staff working on the project. Part of it is money that's been spent at that intersection already on preliminary design, that we would just remove this project from the Main Street Sidewalk project. Actually, the Main Street Sidewalk project has never included these pedestrian enhancements. It's only included the sidewalk elements. So this is its own little project it is its own distinct project, but much of the survey work that has been done and even a lot of preliminary engineering in that area would apply to this project as well. So we're just asking for your support and by approving this resolution.
You're ready to give support, Mr. Neely?
I've noticed because in particular there's an increase of recreational bike use on Main Street. One thing we seem to be lacking is some parking for them, places where they can park their bikes and so forth. So I think it's largely past this point of the bikers going through. And I don't know if you can accommodate that within this grant or not, but I think it's something that we need to look at.
We actually on the sidewalk project, we are including bike racks on every block, or at least one set on every block, not necessarily on both sides, but we do have that in mind for the sidewalk project, and we've requested funding in other areas. We're trying to find money wherever we can, but we could. I'm not sure if you could actually physically find places for bike racks in this distinct little project, but we are addressing that on the Main Street Sidewalk project.
Do you want to make a motion then while you're on the mic?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Marty, you want to?
I'll get you.
No.
Go ahead, speak.
Go ahead and make a motion, please, and then we can speak. You can go ahead and make a motion.
I'll move resolution 1016 for our support, the 2011 ODOT pedestrian bicycle grant application to take in Main Street pedestrian bicycle improvements.
I apologize, minor correction there, it is the 2012-13 Ped Bike grant program. It is reflected in the resolution, but I didn't correct it. Action.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
Second, please. Second. Moved by Commissioner Neely, second by Commissioner Nocita. Commissioner Smith, speak to it.
Well, possible conflict.
Whoa.
I might as well just get them all out there. I own a walking tour business that does tours down on Main Street. This is obviously, a pedestrian access thing on Main Street, but it shouldn't affect my ability to decide on it. I wanted to ask one question. I think that this is it's obviously, there's no doubt with the Terrace edition that this is a huge connection for many aspects of trails and things that we have going on downtown. But it's also, I guess the one question I have is a piece that appears to me to kind of be left out, and that's the connection between 10th Street and the other side of the railroad track, which is horrible. So I don't know how we address, for people that choose to walk down Singer Hill as opposed to going on the elevator, and shame on you unless the elevator's closed, but there's a lot of people that do walk down Singer Hill. The sidewalk on Singer Hill is fairly narrow. It's nice to walk down, but when you get to the bottom of Singer Hill, that connection between the base of Singer Hill and that intersection is very confusing, and we know that just by in terms of traffic and the issues with the coffee shop and all the other things that happen there. But there's no distinct path there or sidewalk there, and I wonder if that's not something we're looking at as part of this. When do we look at that, and what are the issues in getting pedestrians across that railroad crossing? And was that looked at as part of this or not? I think that's a crucial piece, another crucial notion there, and I don't know how we.
I agree. What we're doing with that little remaining missing link, Commissioner, is continuing to work on it. We also needed a letter of support from the railroad, and with a short timeline, and they would not sign a letter of support unless we committed to improving that crossing. And there's a little bit of question about, and they really do not want to invite pedestrians across the railroad. So we have different philosophies, and it could be a significant cost to get a pedestrian crossing across the railroad. And whether or not that's a cost the city would want to bear, or if that's some sort of railroad responsibility, there's a lot of discussion that could occur about that. The railroad doesn't want to spend any money on a pedestrian crossing. And again, because it's attracting pedestrians to cross the railroad. There are also some significant grade problems that would be costly to overcome. So what we thought with this initial application is we would limit the scope of it so that it would be agreeable to the railroad for their support, and then we could continue to have discussions with them or look into it for a future project, or if a development was to occur on that corner, we would have taken care of part of the frontage improvements, but then maybe the development could also address that remaining link.
What piece, how far back does the piece that the city owns go? Does it go all, the city owns that lot right on the corner, right? But it doesn't go all the way back to, our lot doesn't go all the way back to the railroad track, does it?
Well, it abuts the railroad tracks. It's not clear at this time whether or not the railroad actually has an easement through there.
Okay.
That part of the railroad is not well defined, and they're there. But it's not clear if there's a separate easement. It is clear in other parts of the city where the railroad has their own land or has an exclusive easement. I don't want to get into legal territory here, but there are also portions where it's not clear, and this is one of them.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Any questions about the motion? On the motion?
Just what you said. Sarah.
Commissioner Neely,
I'd like to point out that the city existed a long time
You're
before
right.
the railroad.
Exactly.
Yeah, but talk to Union Pacific about that.
The downtown was different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, Kelly, go please.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West? Aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita? Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Next item of business is the Cedar Creek Culvert Improvement Project. This is for access to the culverts. Nancy, can you use yours as well?
Yes, this is a fairly straightforward issue, but we thought we'd bring it to you because you haven't seen anything about this project necessarily, other than we've talked about it very briefly in the budget. So in the storms of the January 1st, 2009 storms, we had a major problem with this culvert, and it caused damage as it overflowed. Then when we examined it more carefully, it also has a lot of structural failures, and so we really need to replace the culvert. In looking at the survey and designing the culvert replacement, we realized we had to get access through this property to get to the culvert. And so when we discussed getting a construction easement from the people that own this very narrow little strip of property, they said, that property is really not used by us. We'd rather just sell it to you. And they said they would like to get $1,500 for that. And we talked to Scott Archer and asked him to talk to the PRAC, because Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, because this abuts Cedar Creek Park, and they were supportive of the acquisition. So we're just
coming to you tonight, asking for you to approve this acquisition.
Mr. Neely.
I have a question on the culvert itself. What's your question? Does the culvert extend all the way to the outfall, or does it act as sort of a stream going?
It just crosses the driveway.
So, okay.
It's not a long culvert. It's basically a driveway crossing.
Okay, good.
Does someone wish to make a motion on this purchase?
So moved.
Commissioner Neely. Seconded by Commissioner Smith. Further discussion? Thank you, Kelly. Vote please.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Next item of business is ordinance 10-1007, annexing certain property to the city of Oregon City and approving the May 18th election results for measure 3-359. Does this need any discussion? It's just, it's
already
basically a formality of adopting section.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner West. Any comment?
Is
Kelly,
an ordinance, we'll have the.
Oh, wait, an ordinance. So would you please read for the first reading, Mr. Bison?
Okay, sorry. Ordinance number 10-1007, an ordinance annexing certain property to the city of Oregon City and approving the May 18th, 2010 election results for annexation 09-01.
Thank you. Now, Kelly, please.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0.
I got a legal question.
Commissioner Neely.
We don't approve those annexations of bills simply because they don't come into the city, so we have to.
It's actually on the consent agenda.
It is.
It is a consent agenda where
We approve all
you
of it.
accept the results, but
Yeah.
you don't amend the city boundaries.
Right.
So you've got a failure and an approval on your.
Yeah, we always accept election results. Okay, for the second reading, this is ordinance 10-1003, the Copious Development Code Amendments. Can I have a motion for approval of the change?
I have
Commissioner
an
Nocita.
issue that I'd like to raise, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
I want to propose continuing this, and I don't know, I want to give the reasons why I want to continue it, and I'll get advice from the manager and the city attorney and my colleagues as to whether it's appropriate to do it what I'm proposing now or as part of this revision as amendments to these proposed code amendments while we still have the opportunity to add amendments to them, or to wait for another process. My preference would be to add them to this code amendment because they're not, as far as text, I don't think very complicated. And they have to do with, again, with the appeals process. You may recall that last year, when Mr. Edgar was interested in doing an appeal, there was some things in the code that weren't clear that we did correct in the code amendment to make notice requirements. And it is not untypical that, you know, a specific decision will highlight some weaknesses in the code that, you know, we need to address through corrections. And I think what I experienced over the past couple of weeks with the Atkinson Church application highlighted some issues I'd like to address in possible code amendments. And there are really three. And the first one is, it's another notice issue, but it's a notice issue to commissioners, and specifically regarding our commission call-up authority under ORS 27180. We have this authority to call up land use decisions, but we don't typically, and there are many land use decisions, we don't get specific notice of land use decisions, so we don't know whether we want to exercise our discretion to do a commission call-up.
I'm going to interrupt you just a second to ask, has staff heard this before?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I haven't. I'm not sure if the manager.
No one has.
No one has.
No one has.
So I think
And
I think it's inappropriate to bring that up when having not vetted that with staff. And so I guess I would like to ask my
Well,
colleagues.
it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing because, and that's why I brought up this fact that we're in the middle of an amendment process. And I don't mind bringing it up to staff and talking with, staff about it.
So
But
the issue is when.
when,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and
It's-
and if we do that, as I said earlier, I think in the middle of a code amendment process that's already underway would be my preference over doing it in a separate process.
Well, in my view, a very important part of the code amendments are the public hearing and the public notice and the vetting through the committees. And so, I'd like to adopt this and have that be part of the next, or next piece. That's my view. I don't know if that's you.
That's what I would say too, and run it by staff and then put it on a work session agenda if necessary. But I don't think it's fair to hold this up, and we haven't really noticed all the things that you're going to speak about. It's in the same level of detail that we've noticed all this other.
Let me ask the question, in the typical course of something like this, when would, I assume we can amend the code at any time. So there would not necessarily not be any, anything that would, prevent us from, say, once we do the second reading, in August or something, doing another code amendment.
Concerns I would raise is one, there is a 45-day notice period to DLCD. There you have a process laid out in your code, so it will take several months to do it. The other thing, if there are amendments that have the effect of rezoning property, and that's defined a little broadly, this is ballot measure 56. You've got to provide notice to any property owner whose property would be affected by it. Changes to the way in which the appeal procedures work is probably not something that requires ballot measure 56 notice, but if you're going to restrict uses, that would get raise additional costs in terms of notice. So those are the two things to think about in terms of turning around a quick new ordinance.
It sounds like we have the majority that would like to go forward with this vote and ask you to bring that up to the House. Okay.
I would just like to clarify one issue. At our last commission meeting, you may recall Mr. Tobias's excellent speed reading skills of the three code sections.
Not to be done again.
I did miss one section, but that section has the old language in it that references the Commission on Indian Services in the Yakama Nation, and I would request my recommendation would be to adopt this second reading. I believe that if you look at the CIA, why we originally wrote that language that we did was if you go to the Commission on Indian Services page for Northwest, it has the 4 tribes that we have specifically spelled out in the other 3 code sections. I believe that I have the ability to require the applicant to do that as the director on a land use application. And then when we come back with code amendments, we will catch this last section and update it. I am very comfortable that we will notify as the other 3 sections are identified in the code. So I just wanted to point that out so that in the future, when we bring this back.
So to clarify, in other words, the specifications of the 4 tribes that were in 3 sections of the code are still there, but the 4th section?
I missed I taught the 3 sections. I missed one section when we were reading them all into the record.
Okay, so if we go the way you're proposing, the specified tribes will still be in those 3 sections?
Yes. Yeah, that's in the code. Just this one section.
Who does the administration of it?
Right. So.
Is everyone okay with that? Okay, sounds like they are. So we're okay with second reading then. I don't think we have a motion. Do we? Do we have a motion on the floor? Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
I'll move to the second reading and final act whether ordinance redevelopment code amendments.
Second.
Hold on.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Neely, second by Commissioner Smith, and now for the second reading of the revisement.
Ordinance number 10-1003, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City adopting amendments to Titles 12, 13, 16, and 17 of the Oregon City Municipal Code.
That was fast.
I like those.
Thank you very much. Is there any other comment?
I like the longer version of that. Go through it so fast.
You can stay after class.
Yeah,
you can stay after class.
Okay, Kelly, let's have the vote.
Commissioner Neely,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita,
Aye.
Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Next is also a second reading, ordinance number 10-1005, which amends the building and construction standards in section 1504.010 of the Oregon City Municipal Code. Did that last time. May I have a motion, please?
I move, or so moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Smith. For the second reading, Mr. Bison.
Ordinance number 10-1005, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City repealing Title 15 Buildings and Construction, Chapter 1504 Building Code, Section 15.04.010 adopted of the Oregon City Municipal Code of 1991, and enacting new Title 15 Building and Construction, Chapter 15.04 Building Code, Section 15.04.010.
Thank you. Comments? Vote please, Kelly.
Commissioner Neely,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita,
Aye.
Mayor Norris.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. And then lastly on the business agenda, we have the minutes of June 16th, of which Commissioner Neely was absent.
I don't think it's the last item because we pulled something out of the consent agenda.
Well, but that's all part of the consent agenda, so, yeah, right, technicality. We have a motion for adoption of the minutes.
Move for approval.
Moved by Commissioner West, second by Commissioner Smith.
Well, I did a second, but I will. Second.
Okay, thank you. The minutes.
Technicality.
Kelly, the vote please.
Commissioner Neely,
Abstain.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita,
June 8th work session.
June 16th.
That's not the work sessions.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Commissioner-
Aye.
Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 4-0 with one abstention. Next, we move into the consent agenda. May I have a motion for adoption of the consent agenda minus item,
So moved.
8B.
8E, yes, thank you. MS4.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Neely on the consent agenda. The vote please, Kelly.
Commissioner Neely, sorry, Commissioner Neely,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Nocita,
This is on the MS4 one. right?
No.
This is
This is the consent agenda minus.
that's item 8B.
Aye.
Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. And the last item would be the MS4 committees, joint defense, confidentiality, and common interest agreements. The question on this?
I'd be happy to talk about it. I think it makes sense on the consent agenda. Commissioner Nocita, I believe, pulled it because of his role in the litigation involving MS4.
Does anyone need to have a discussion on it? Or, okay, then may I have a motion on it, please?
So moved.
None of us can get to our
Move
seats right now.
move to approve the joint defense and the confidential agreement.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Are there further comments? Kelly, the vote please.
Commissioner Neely,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita,
Abstain.
Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 4-0 with one abstention. Now moving into communications, let's begin with our city manager.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. First thing I want to update you on is the High Rocks efforts we're making with signage down there, and I can't say enough how impressed I've been with our police department and our public works department with the expediency with which they've responded, and also the city of Gladstone and their officials and other emergency responders. I think you got my recent email on that, and this afternoon about 5:30 I sent you another one. That email includes some detail in it about what you're going to see in the signage plan and so on. It's not been erected yet. Some of the signs are actually being built as we speak, so, well, probably not this late, but they're being built this week, and then we hope to get them up, and I've got a date on the email to you, so you'll have an estimate of when that's going to happen, and I will probably implore the mayor to assist me in trying to get the word out as much as possible with the media when we get closer to putting those signs up, and I know I can count on that as well. Also, we have a number of staff tonight that want to update you on a few things. I think we'll start with the, well, before we move into that, I think I can remind you that the summer hours for the visitor center is open, but the museum portion is not open, just to confirm that, and just want to get that out over the airways. I believe Nancy Kay has something to mention about Tri-City and also about another member of her staff who's become a PE in the last few weeks. So I'll turn it over to Nancy.
Can become a PE?
Come on.
Now, that's what it used to be. Portland is eliminating PE, and we're a staff that's PE.
Not physical education.
Oh, okay.
So far, Eric has just done very, very good work for the city. He's working on Main Street sidewalks. He's also working on the Small Works project that uses free capital for the West City Community. He's also working to incentives, sorry.
Oh, okay. Some turn on and some don't. Anyway, Eric Wargren has been doing outstanding work for the city, and he is a real asset to the Public Works Engineering Group team, and I think you'll see the results of his work with these projects that we've authorized this summer, and then he also is the person that is preparing the grant application for the Bike Fed grant, and he's just doing a super job working with ODOT, working with the downtown, working with the railroad, and also working with multiple contractors at this point. So he's struggling very well, and his quality of work, I can't say enough about it. So super congratulations to Eric. And then the other thing I wanted to give you an update on is we've made progress with Tri-City on their design of Agnes Road. That was a little bit of a contentious issue between the two agencies several months ago. There was kind of a misunderstanding of what they were required to do with their master plan land use approval. And then as a result of the agreement on how we were going to build Agnes Road, they realized that they were going to have to take out quite a few cottonwood trees that run along the between I-205 and the existing Agnes Road. And that's not solely caused by the roadway design, but they're also raising Agnes about 3 feet so that they can get it out of the floodplain, and that just putting in all that fill in that area also is contributing to impact on the trees. But what we agreed to was they were required to build a green street to collector standards. And what we've come up with is recognizing that we have quite a bit of flexibility in our standards so that we can encourage context-sensitive design on our new roadways. And what we've done is we have included the bioswale for stormwater treatment. We've included a sidewalk for alternative mode transportation. There's also a vegetative buffer between the sidewalk and the treatment plant where they're going to be constructing a basalt wall that is all intended to create an attractive edge to their development. And then on the roadway side, we've agreed, we usually require that there be on-street parking on collectors, which Agnes is, and we decided based on this land use, there really is no need for on-street parking. So we were able to reduce their anticipated pavement width by about 8 feet, which has multiple benefits. We are requiring a 6-foot bike lane on the Tri-City side, and typically a developer is required to build a half street plus 10 feet. So their half street would be a bike lane and 1 travel lane, and then plus 10 feet. But they've agreed to build an extra foot, so we will actually end up with 2 11-foot travel lanes. And they're going to build a small shoulder and then a slope going down from their roadway fill for the floodplain. So all of those combined made for a good roadway cross section that meets the requirements of their land use application. And then in terms of the trees, they have determined they're working with planning now on the tree replacement program, and they have hired an arborist and hired a landscape architect
to create a really, it looks like a very interesting tree replacement plan. They have to remove 96 cottonwood trees. Some of them are kind of small, and some of them almost look like they've come out on their own. And they're very interesting, kind of a real weird mishmash of cottonwood trees. But needless to say, they have to take 96 out. Planning has determined that they need to now plant 96 new trees, and they are proposing to plant a diverse assortment of firs, hemlocks, and cedars and spruces that replicate the kind of trees that people would have seen coming out on the Barlow Trail in Oregon City. These include the noble fir, grand fir, white fir, Engelmann spruce, western hemlock, western red cedar, and Alaska yellow cedar. They worked with Jerry Herman in kind of coming up with some sort of a theme for these new trees. And they are very concerned about public reaction when they take down these cottonwoods. They're really very nervous that the community is going to wonder what in the world are they doing out there. So it's important for the commission to understand that this is required because of the roadway construction and the fill to get, so they can have emergency access during a flood. But then they're also proposing what looks to be a very creative and thoughtful mix of replacement trees. So their mitigation program is looking very good, and it has an educational component actually. So that, and they're also supposed to be able to survive in wet areas because there's quite a bit of drainage that collects along this area. So that's just an update. I know that the commission had heard that we hadn't reached any conclusions in this area, and they are concerned about public reaction to the tree removal. So I wanted to make sure you were updated on that situation.
Got a couple questions, Nancy. First, Commissioner Aceta.
Yeah, I'm immediately when I hear 96 cottonwood trees are going to be removed, my ears perk up. Something like this, I mean, it doesn't rise to the same level of concern to me as the riparian trees on the Cove, specifically because the main concern I have with the riparian trees on the Cove are the ecological impacts of the cooling and the shading for habitat within the Cove. But one of the questions I have is this a change in an existing land use plan?
No.
Street right away was required as part of the application.
But tree removal was not proposed in the land use application. Because it sounds to me from Ms. Krashauer is saying right now is that this is a recent realization that was not considered during the land use process.
I think, from what I understood in working with Pete and Tony, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that the trees in the right-of-way are part of the approval of the street section, and the whole street approval was conditioned as something that would occur during development, and that this is a separate application from their master plan land use decision.
None of these trees are located on private property. They're all within the existing land use right of way that's not located. So we're treated as a commercial street. It's in our right of way. They're building a road that we put a condition on them to put in, so we're requiring to mitigate those trees that they're taking out in our road.
Was the original land use application for this project a type 3 or a type 2?
Type 3.
So it would have required public notice and a public hearing.
It did.
And I think I'd like to ask the city manager and the city attorney if this raises enough of an issue that it's going to need a public notice and public hearing, in part particularly to allow those folks who are going to be concerned if and when those trees do get removed, that they have a voice and have the right to express themselves in a public hearing.
My initial thought is I'd have to look at the application and see what it says and what the proposal is.
My colleagues mind if the city attorney looks into that.
Oh.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Neely.
Somehow the people involved as arborists for the city of Oregon City seem to hate cottonwoods. I would point out that the settlers that came into the Oregon, along the Oregon Trail, when I hit that haven area, would have seen many cottonwoods. It was a wetland, much of that was a wetland area, and cottonwoods, that's their habitat. However, I guess I don't have a great deal of concern there. But we're talking about also that area between Agnes Road and Highway 205, is that right?
Right, it's a distance that is towards good way. It doesn't go all the way up to the existing driveway entrances to Tri-City. So there's a little bit south of that, and it goes down to them.
Yeah. And you have easily a kind of a swale that is operating there along that area. And if you look at the swale, you will see that there are willows in there. You're focusing on trees, but within the swales, I would strongly recommend finding some willows. These aren't trees, they're short-statured bushes, but I think you ought to look at more than the forest community kind of thing in a swale-like area.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a good.
There are willows there.
I'm not sure if this particular section has the swale. I'll have to go back and review that. But good point. Thank you.
Okay. Please continue. Oh, yeah, so you finished? Okay. That's all. We have the report. Okay. I wish to appoint Lynn Bettridge to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee as a representative from the Pioneer Community Center, beginning today and ending December 31, 2012. Now we can go into commission reports. Who has reports to do from the commission? I know Commissioner Moody does because you had to fact meeting. Metro Policy Advisory Committee, where we're discussing nitty-gritty issues. Two things I'll discuss. One is that they're looking at this point, and it's very introductory, at the 2010 capacity ordinance, which is a guide to the kind of growth that happens in the metro area. It looked like it was very preliminary. For one thing, a lot of the material was actually presented in handwritten form and not available. However, there was discussions about the kind of growth that occurs, and a lot of times when you do these kinds of projections, we're talking about 50% infill redevelopment areas. The mayor of Portland made the point. Of course, they don't have too much area to grow in there outside of where they are, but made the comment that I believe that somewhat 80% of their development that occurs there is in fact of the form redevelopment and infill, and that only 30% of that is actually located within the downtown area. A lot of that occurs Portland line. We're not as restricted in growth, but the point is, I think that the region needs to look at and find ways to incentivize more infill redevelopment efforts, and perhaps 50% should be regarded as a conservative estimate of what can be done in terms of refill or infill over the next 20 years. Three different municipalities have come forth requesting designations of centers. There apparently, since the onset when centers were originally identified, there have only been two new ones that have come in. So they're having three requests that are coming in. One from Happy Valley, one from Cornelius, and one from Hillsborough. The ones that were formally presented there, the Happy Valley representative wasn't there. The Happy Valley is looking at a relocation of its current town center, which is located where its current city hall is, and looking to relocate it on the area that I used to drive through to Gresham that was all rural, 172nd and Sunnyside area, as a relocation of that particular town center. There was no presentation by them at that particular meeting. Cornelius, which does not have a town center, is requesting that it does have one. And the city of Hillsborough is requesting a regional center in Canasmon area of Hillsborough, extending beyond that, a larger area than that, so a rather substantial area. And there was a bit of discussion about that. Our county commissioner, Lehan, is the representative from the county, Clackamas County, to Impact, and she was talking about an equity issue. Clackamas County only has one regional center, that's this area of Oregon City here, and Washington County already has 3, and monies are dispersed through regional centers, and because of the equity of having a 4th one, I actually spoke up as a bit of a devil advocate on the side of Hillsborough, suggesting that if their intent was to have more dense development, including residential development, and then relieve the pressure of growth outside their urban area, I think it was well worth considering. What was interesting, neither the mayor of Hillsborough nor the staff person that was making the presentation indicated that was their intent at all. So I don't know how that's going to progress. But those were the major issues that came forward at the Impact meeting.
We will be discussing those. The representatives, Impact representatives from Clackamas County, will be meeting tomorrow morning to discuss the Clackamas County sort of position on changing regional centers. I think the important thing is, what impact does that have on us? I mean, money hasn't just poured in because we're a regional center, though we have gotten some transportation money that can only go to centers. So I think that will be an interesting discussion, because in all of the panels and time on Impact, we have had reports that regional centers aren't performing like they were intended to perform. I mean, we haven't grown into our regional center yet. In Metro, it doesn't have the means to offer much money to regional centers. So I think the debate will be very rigorous, I think, on, if we have more centers, what does that mean? Does that mean there's less money to go around? Or does that mean that we have focused development? Does it mean transportation? Nancy?
The one significant transportation item, though, is that it's been very clear in all of the planning for the region that regional centers be connected by light rail. And that would be, if there's more regional centers, then that might affect when Oregon City would receive light rail.
So I think that's important. So if you have items that you think affect Oregon City, please let us know, because we'll be making this decision, I think, next Wednesday. I'm not positive when it's up for decision, but we've been debating it for a while. So we'll keep you posted. It's an important one. Is that it?
Well, I have an announcement.
I think Commissioner Smith is
sorry. Would you like to go? No, I was just going to say I've been enjoying a nice summer and a slow time at work. I have no announcement.
Okay, Commissioner Aceta.
Two items, Madam Mayor. First is a proposed agenda item. We want to remind everybody that we discussed earlier in the year, and we have actually budgeted for election on proposed charter amendments. And election is not far off in the future, and I think we probably should start focusing on fulfilling that, and I think it's in our goals and objectives too, to start talking about how many and whether and the language by proposed amendments to submit to refer to the voters. Whether it should be in November or next April or May, or no, I think the spring elections are March and May.
They are.
And so I'm wondering if there's enough space on Wednesday's agenda or next Tuesday's agenda to chat about this.
I would like to interject in here. To do a charter amendment will require a citizens committee and a pretty extensive review process. We do not have time to get anything together for November. No way at all. In fact, it'd have to be filed for early August. It's early August, and it's just way too short. So I would recommend that process begin at the goal setting session, what you want to do, when you want to launch the committee, etc., because that would be a pretty intensive process.
Are there different levels of involvement for depending on how complex a charter amendment is? I mean, if a charter amendment's a one-word amendment, do you really need a citizens committee?
You don't really need a citizens committee at all. It's more policy call by the commission how much public involvement you want to have.
Yeah, I don't know that there's ever been to do a substantive charter amendment, it's really got to bubble up from citizens, I think, who really desire that change. And our whole charter needs to be rewritten. So I think when there's enough time for one to do that.
Yeah, I guess I have a little bit of an issue with the suggestion that it wait till next year's goal setting session, because we added it during this year's goal setting session for something to do over the course of this year.
Yeah.
I would suggest that we set that up for a not too distant work session for discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's just reality there.
Yeah,
as a case of actually having a commissioner see before the kinds of things he would like to see in the charter amendment, and I think a work session would be a good place to do it.
Okay, are there 3 commissioners that would like to have that happen?
Okay.
That's the request to add that to a work session.
Would you be? I'm completely don't know what charter amendments.
Well, one of them we brought up in your interview, so you know one of them. So, but there have been others discussed.
What was it?
I'll go back and look at the table.
How about if you and Commissioner C to get together so you have some idea about that, and then have a discussion about process and timing?
I'd just like to have an adequate bunch of support here for you to have for our staff to do whatever we're supposed to do to get ready.
Right. Yeah, I think it'll be a discussion on timing and process, and so I don't know that maybe staff will get ahead of that because there's been no movement yet until it happens. Okay, Commissioner Smith,
That's fine. I'll hold off on anything else.
Okay, Commissioner Smith.
I just wanted to report on my trip to Chicago.
Oh, not the one to Hawaii?
You took a trip? I understand you took a trip?
Yes, I did. There was 2 trips. The first one was for work, and that was to Chicago, and I went as a representative of South Fork Water with our general manager to the American Water Works Association annual conference. And this was my second time attending the conference, and it was extremely helpful. One of the things that I've felt that the hugest learning curve for me on the commission has been with the water, with South Fork Water. So I feel that I'm getting a much better handle on it because of these conferences. Was able to attend a lot of workshops. One of the things, in addition to the workshops last year, I kind of went through the whole track for public officials, and there was a couple new additions to that this year that I attended. And a lot of the topics that are being covered in those are very much the same topics that we're talking about. One of the things that was very helpful was the exposition itself. There's an exposition hall with all the different companies that do work for various plants, etc. And so it's very helpful to be able to go and see the technologies and the new processes and the things that we're doing currently at South Fork Water, but also things that we're going to be incorporating as our master plan comes to fruition. One of the things that I'm definitely trying to learn more about is the tiered rates and things like that. It's an issue that Westlands, I think, are already in the process, or they've already done that. But we've been discussing that in Oregon City, and it's kind of a weird, kind of an odd position where you're as a city talking about conservation, but at the same time selling water. So there's this kind of balance on how that works. So that was very helpful. Water conservation, of course, has been an issue that we've talked about, and that's why the tiered rates have come into, does the amount of water that we're using, is it directly connected to the amount that we're paying, and the people that use more water are in a different tier than people using less water. The conversation of pharmaceuticals in the water, which has been an issue on the world, national, local news, and how the processes that are coming into fruition in terms of how to start measuring these new particles in water and kind of revising the whole way that we look at finding these various things in water. So that's a big discussion. Obviously, the myths about bottled water being safer than tap water, which obviously is ridiculous, and we have the safest water coming out of our faucets, and the difference in how those bottled water is tested versus tap water, the amount of process that tap water has to go through before it gets to us is much more intense than any process that we test bottled water. So it was very helpful. There was also, many speakers from all over the country that were speaking about problems specific to their regions, but a lot of the things that they were sharing are applicable anywhere you go. One of the interesting things in terms of Chicago, anytime you talk about water in various cities, it's directly where they get water and how they get water is all based on the history of the town and how the town evolved, and so you really get a background in the history of the city. With our water from taking water originally out of the Willamette and then having issues with the disease and all the problems that were happening with the Willamette, and then shifting over to the Clackamas and South Fork water and how that came into being. Chicago was kind of in the same kind of similar, different kind of issues, but one of the interesting things in Chicago is they actually reversed the direction that the rivers were flowing, and talked about how that played this role and to protect it. They also, the convention center itself, I'll give John a little credit for this. He was walking around the convention center. He says, "This must be the biggest convention center in the United States." And someone said, "Oh, no, that's not possible. This is," well, he looked it up because he looked it up, and it was. Well, I think it had been superseded by Las Vegas, and then they added a new building in Chicago to make it, again, the biggest in the United States. But why I bring that up is because I think off the top of my head, it's 18 acres of roof. And so they were really concerned about the amount of water that ran off of that roof and how to deal with that. And so they've actually created a big pipe that takes pretty much all the water from off of those 18 acres or so of the roof right back into to Lake Michigan. There was a huge focus in Chicago in terms of green roofs and rooftop gardens and things like that, and which was extremely visible from the top of the Sears Tower or something like that, looking over, and you can see that almost all the roofs, have these amazing gardens, and we've talked about various ways of making the tops of Oregon City's buildings look a little bit more pleasing, or at least something other than blue tarps. And I could see, us doing some incredible things in Oregon City where, you're up on the promenade looking down onto this amazing garden, and what that would do to the runoff and flooding issues and things like that. So I thought that was very cool. The other thing I saw walking through the convention center was a company that was marketing this trailer essentially, which I showed to John. He said, "Oh, we're already working on that." And one of the important things in terms of water is the education piece and the awareness in the community about what water we're providing, and also conservation and all those issues. And so creating an additional kind of marketing piece or educational piece that goes out to community events, both in Oregon City and Westland, would be a great piece. And so South Fork's actually working on creating a trailer that would be taken to the antique fair or to various events where people could, drink right from the tap or water. So it's basically a water wagon that would have drinking fountains and hand washing stations. That, a place like Farmers Market, things like that would be a great way to showcase the water that we make and provide those cities. So it was a lot to take in a fairly short amount of time, and because of the hard work, then I went straight from there the next day to Hawaii. Where I researched water in various ways: swimming pool, ocean, and that was very nice too.
But not at taxpayers' expense.
Not that right. That was my own pocket and with help from my friends.
I do have a question, Commissioner. Was this funded by the loan that we're giving South?
No.
Mr. Tobias, is this your last evening?
It is probably my last evening for a while. Mr. Sullivan is returning this weekend, and he should be present at your next meeting. So
well, I want to thank you for your service.
You got it to last you'll see of me, but you'll see more of Mr. Sullivan. I also want to take 2 seconds here and respond to Commissioner Nacita's question about the Agnes Avenue and Tri-Cities. We don't have the full application here, and that's what I want to look at. But what we do have shows that the construction of Agnes Road was part of the application, and that there's grading details that show trees being removed in the area that they're talking about now. So I don't think there's a change from what was there. This was, refining the design of Agnes Avenue, but it doesn't change the removal of the trees.
Were the trees scheduled to be removed as part of the original land use approval?
I don't know. As I mentioned, I don't have the entire thing before me, but what we do know is that the land use application took in the entire area, and it shows a road going in the spot where the road currently is, and that the details show trees under where the road is going to be. So if in fact there wasn't a specific drawing that said these are the 96 trees were going to be removed, that was information that wasn't requested or wasn't provided, and there was approval of the road going in that location. So if there should have been more discussion of it, it wasn't caught. Nobody did, and the approval shows the road going in the appropriate location.
Is there any more business or enough that's come before us? And we are adjourned.